Focus. Is this actually live? That's interesting. I don't understand how live streaming works anymore. But I do know the last time I tried to live stream, we put together all these bells and all these whistles with the intro and the outro. It didn't work. So we'll just keep it simple. The likes per video has been working. The easiest way to get likes on a video is to share the video. You take the video link and you post it. You post it on a website like YouTube. You go to a video, you post the link, you use the word Jokkull. By the way, I should probably add a title to this live stream. Where is it? All right. It's already generated a title for me. That's nice. I will tell you that if you simply go to a video, it could be popular, unpopular, and you post a link to the video, then people will click the link. Now, not everybody who clicks the link is going to like the video. We'll say 70 likes till new stream. But there's going to be a certain percentage of people that click the link that do like the video. Now, my ratio, given the fact that my audience is pretty insular, it's something like 1 to 10 ratio of likes to views. So if you share the video and it gets seen 10 times by 10 different people, then there's a like. It's just that simple. I always find it interesting when people complain about the goal. I wonder what the implication is there. People should think about that. People should think about the time that we spend complaining about anything versus taking action to work toward our goals, whether that's the goal of seeing a new video, whether that's the goal of something personal that we want to change in our lives, whether that's something grandiose and civilizational. How much time do we spend not just complaining to one another, but how much time do we spend complaining to ourselves? How much time do we spend in an internal monologue of despair? I have people ask me this question somewhat innocently, but there really is a poison behind this question. There's many ways to phrase the question. There's many ways that the question can appear. But the question is essentially, what is the political solution? Is there a political solution? Let's zoom out for a moment. What's the political solution for the next 1,000 years? Are people really so naive? Or if that doesn't work for you, if that doesn't hit the nail on the head for you, How about what's the political solution for the next million years? What about the next billion years? What's the political solution to the coming dying of the sun? What do we do when the sun is dying? What do we do about the, heat death of the universe? What are we going to do about these things? I think sometimes you have to zoom out to that level. And maybe I'm biased because it's just something I do anyway. It's a thought experiment that I've been drawn to. Almost morbidly. There's almost something supremely morbid about the idea of vast passages of time. And it's seen in that poem about Ozymandias, King Ozymandias, look upon my works and despair. There are actually two poems about Ozymandias, and they were, I believe, both submitted for a poetry competition surrounding the events of these archaeological discoveries in Egypt, where they were seeing just how vast and how ancient and how sophisticated the Egyptians were. And when we look back upon the ancient past and we realize how complex these societies were and how they degenerated and rusted away, and how they're really no longer with us in that same form today, it does shift our perspective. And there is an argument that Egypt really has continued, that Egypt, in fact, is the descendant of a much older civilization, and that Egyptian civilization did live on in its influences through the Middle East and through Greece, Eleusinian mysteries, that Egyptian civilization did survive, and in fact we are living in its current permutation, its current iteration. And that's one way to look at it, that all of these things are connected no matter how different they may seem. They're simply a reiteration of one another. That is the cyclical perspective. But I think there's a kind of egoic attachment we have to the particularities of our time. I see this in the worship of the retro aesthetics of the 1980s. That somehow aesthetics peaked in the 1980s. And it's almost a neoclassical aesthetic, or at least the way that people think about it is very Hellenistic. We remember that the Greeks thought that there was such a thing as the perfect body, and that there was essentially one form that all beauty converged upon. When people idolize the 1980s, it sometimes seems that they're viewing things with that sort of Hellenistic perspective, that there is one form of aesthetic beauty. There's this perfect time, and maybe it was 1982, maybe it was 83, one of those years where we peaked, and ever since then we've been going downhill. Which is a shadow of the myth of the Golden Age, but of course in a very superficial form, because 40 years ago, really, you're going to say that was the time when everything was the best in the 1980s? You're kind of obscuring a lot of cringe workout videos and the financial crimes of the 1980s. Our financial system really broke down in the 1980s in a big way. In the 70s, with people like Nixon, you still had a form of financial conservatism, and I would even say a form of financial nationalism. That is, there was still a desire, even when we left the gold standard, there was still a desire to preserve an economy for the working man. And in the 1980s, that was all thrown out the window. And in the 1980s, the regulatory bodies became so weak and so bribed and so corrupt that insider trading reached levels that were unprecedented. There have always been rich people, and rich people have always made money with money. But the levels, it's not simply usury. It's not simply the charging of interest on loans, but it's having a foreknowledge that a company will have a merger and dumping stock or buying up stock in anticipation of an event that the market will then react to and lead to your profit. Have you done anything? There's an Austrian argument for the issuing of loans and the charging of interest. That is time preference, the availability of resources, allocating resources, risk management. All of these things provide justifications, whether you agree or disagree, for the charging of interest. But with insider trading, this was sort of the awakening that I had about libertarianism, is I thought there should be no regulation on insider trading. It doesn't make any sense from a libertarian perspective that there should be any limit on insider trading. I'd love to hear the argument. I think it would be quite convoluted and nonsensical, because I was quite deep into that ideology. And then I discovered all of these people like Ivan Boesky and Milken. And people later, we have The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio. And this class of urchins who come out of the woodwork and who are profiting off the market without providing any value. They're not... The way the stock market is supposed to work is it's like a horse race, but the horses are companies. So you bet on a company, you say, I think this company is going to do well, and if it does well, you're rewarded, and if it does poorly, you lose money. That's how it's theoretically supposed to work. Now, that whole model on its face is already questionable, because it's quite different than, for instance, buying government bonds or something. It's not the same thing as making an investment. And this is especially true when you have these insider traders, and they're making billions of dollars pumping and dumping and buying and selling. And they're not investing in the sense of they're looking at the calculations and the statistics and saying, oh, this one looks good. And there are people who do that. There are investors. There are investment analysts whose job it is to do that. But when you have these insider traders, there's no calculation. It is simply an incestuous network of urchins who say, next month we're going to have a merger. It's time to sell. It's time to buy. And they move things around and they get filthy rich. It's not even that it's a gamble for them. It's a surefire thing. It's a rigged system. There's no way to lose. And they're just making all of this money for what? What value are they providing? What libertarian... You can make a libertarian argument for interest. You can make one even for investment in the stock market. But insider trading, there's no benefit to anybody except themselves. It's a purely egoic practice. And what do they do with the money? Are they going to give it back to the community? Or do they get high on their own supply and start to believe that they are like gods? And everybody else is disposable. And what kind of society do we have when the so-called democracy is informed by media? And when, at an ever-increasing rate, it seems that the censorship is such that I'm watching YouTubes that are not even political YouTubes. I'm watching YouTube videos. And they're not even political. They have nothing to do with politics. And people are saying, oh, well, we've got to be very careful about what we say. And so this whole myth that I was sold, and I think it really I started to discover YouTube in 2008, and then, you move on. From 2010 to 2016, there was this period where it seemed like things were opening up. And new possibilities were rising, and it couldn't be controlled. And, many of the things that people are saying right now about Bitcoin, to me, seems very reminiscent of the sort of things that people were saying about the internet. Oh, you can't control the internet. You see, if you started to censor, this is the argument. I used to be on Reddit. I used to be a Redditor. And I used to listen to all the free speech arguments. It used to be the free speech platform on the internet. And how did that change? How did that happen? You know, everyone said that it's impossible to censor Reddit because if they start censoring one thing, they have to censor another thing. And if they censor that, it creates this huge problem where they're going to have to spend all this money censoring things. And the profit motive says that you just go with what the law is, which is freedom of speech. Whatever's legal, you just go by the law, and that's the cheapest way to do it. Well, that's a flawed argument because of investors and advertisers, but you have to ask, where do the investors and advertisers get their money, and who creates the media spectacle that says, oh, Reddit is hosting dangerous extremist content, we have to shut that down. And so there's a whole perverse view of the profit motive that was fueling this concept that Reddit was going to be a free speech bastion, and failed to recognize that we have multi-billion-dollar media corporations that are swooping in to create a moral panic surrounding freedom of speech to justify a whole industry of bureaucrats. I just watched a video of a man getting his restaurant shut down. And the man's angry appeal was, why is this health inspector still getting a paycheck, but I don't, my cook doesn't, my dishwashers don't, my waiters and waitresses, they don't get a paycheck. But this health inspector does. And that is the way our society is shifting. Is 10 years ago, it seemed ridiculous, it seemed ludicrous to suggest that there would be an entire army of censors going around incessantly checking everybody's posts. It seemed impossible. But we do have an army. First of all, we do have a paid army of people whose job it is to make sure that you don't say anything that threatens their religion. Number two, we have volunteers, because in the last 10 years we've had a religious, you could say it's a religious revival in some ways, although then there's the question of, is this religion a permutation of Christianity? Is it something new? But I would list it among one of the great religious revolutions we've had in the last 10 years. You've had this explosion. Now there are so-called conservative women, conservative female activists, you know, and they're worshiping George Floyd. And how did things happen this quickly? How did it happen so quickly that people went from 0 to 100 with this stuff? It's always been around to some extent. You can go back decades and decades and even centuries if you want to find its origins. But how it almost seemed ex nihilo. It almost seems to be like the lighting of a gas can. So the question is, where was that potentiality? How were we in such a ready state? And it was the breakdown of religion. It was the destruction of Christianity. It was the void that was created that was completely untenable. It was a religious vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. We can't have that. We can't have a society where people are not moralistic. And there's several reasons for that. On a genetic level, people are driven to be moralistic. But more so on an ethical level, there's something within us, I think, deeply embedded in our culture. This idea of finding the heretic and persecuting the heretic. And the people who are, I mean, it's ironic, I suppose, the people who are the weirdest in our society, the people who display their religious devotion are the ones who are the most religious. Now, when I say it like that, it sort of makes sense. But the way that it manifests is people who frankly go out of their way to look abnormal. People who have piercings and tattoos and they dye their hair and they're wearing clothing that's unusual and they're trying to stand out. That is a religious signal. In some ways you could say it's a status, it's a sexual signal, it's a mating signal, it's all kinds of things. But I think there's at least a component that is religious. When somebody dresses up in the goth clothing, when somebody alternative, when they dress up in the leather and the collar, and all of these things that are these ostentatious displays, they are religious. And these are the people who will tell you most fervently, no God, no state, no or whatever they say. You know, these anarchist types, they'll say no authority. But they are the most religious. The people who are the least religious are going around in the t-shirt and the jeans because they have nothing to prove. You know, the religious people, they're putting ash on their head and they're shaving the center of their head to be unusual. That's an unusual thing to do. That hairstyle is completely counterintuitive to all concept of aesthetics and everything. You do it because it's weird. So what I'm saying is that we have an impulse within our population, not everybody, but there's a segment of our population that has a desire to be separate from the world and to impose on the world utopian moralism. And so you see that with the monks who wear the rough cloth, they wear all brown, the brown tunic, and they wear the tonsure, and they shave their head, and they go around in the streets whipping themselves and doing all of these things. There's a desire for that. What's the origin of that? Nietzsche talks about what is the origin of this phenomenon. It is a priest class. It is a class of people who want to be separate from the world, who want to take the world and to transform it. You hear the way that they talk about racism. Racism is almost, it's almost the way that Christians say things like Satan is the king of this world, which is a weird thing to say because they also say Christ is king. But they'll say things like Satan is the prince of this world, and that's why everything's so messed up. That the new religion, they'll say things like, you know, racism is impossible to eradicate, or, you know, simply by virtue of being white, you are racist no matter what. There's no amount of anything that could be done to eliminate that. Basically, until everybody's mixed race, we can never eliminate that. And then they're going to go to colorism. Then they're going to say, well, now the people who are lighter skinned, who are mixed race, are racist against those who are dark skinned. They're pulling that one out too. That's in their back pocket, you know. Right now they want to promote the unity, but that'll come surely enough. That'll come surely enough. Although by that time, you know, if you get society to that point, which in some senses will never quite be at that point because, you know, you look at certain groups of people that do have replacement fertility, and they are, frankly, they are marrying within their own community, and they are endogamous. So you're not actually going to see that situation where we're all mixed race. That's actually not going to happen. But in any case, they'll say things like, yeah, you know, we can never eradicate racism, but that only fuels their passion to attack it. Paradoxically, in the same way that a Christian would say, well, we can never erase sin, we're in a fallen world, but that makes them only more passionate to attack sin. So racism is this new sin. We have to have something. And the billionaire class said, well, we can't have sexual morality, because if people realize the power of sexuality and they control their sexuality, that means they are able to manipulate their own energy. And if you're able to manipulate your own energy, that gives you power. They don't want that. They don't want you to be powerful. They want you to be weak. So they said, no, we can't have sexual morality. We cannot have, because that would also lead to the formation of families, and families is an authority structure that's independent from our power. So we can't have families, we can't have sexual morality, we can't, therefore, these concepts of masculine and feminine, that's not valid. We can't have any kind of concept of authority that is going to make our merchandising more difficult. All of that can be dissolved. But at some point, whether hundreds of years ago or recently, and of course different people are going to realize it at different times, and you have to think about it as a hierarchy, and not every level of the hierarchy has the same level of information, but they're all working in concert. So not everyone knows what they do, but they're working on the same team, essentially. They realized at some point that we can dissolve so much of morality, but you can't eliminate morality. If you create a moral vacuum, then the desire for religion only intensifies. And people who would otherwise be quite, blasé, oh, we go to church on Sunday, whatever. When you remove that from people's lives and you create a vacuum, you create the potential for fanatics. And so they recognize this. They recognize that we are primed for fanaticism, that all their attacks on religion haven't made us less religious. They've actually made us more fanatical and more primed for fanaticism. And you started to see this with the Islamic terrorism in the early 2000s. And now it's shifted into this anti-racist movement that's become international. And it's a global religion. One has to question, will this be like Islamic terrorism? Islamic terrorism, by the way, in one form or another, has been around since the establishment of the State of Israel. Not much prior, to be honest. It is, in a way, it is a reaction, you could say, in the same way that when the United States Army drops Agent Orange on the Vietnamese, or when we drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and we see the mutations, we see the birth defects, right? In the same way, the imposition of the State of Israel in the Middle East, I think, caused a ripple effect, not just in Palestine, but in the client states of Israel / America, such as Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia is a fundamentally perverse state. I think not the people, but the state, the government. I think the government of Pakistan is fundamentally perverse. I think the government of Egypt. I think many of these governments are fundamentally perverse because you have a population that hates America, but you have a government that's completely controlled by America. And I think that causes deep psychological problems. So when you look at someone like Osama bin Laden and his connection with Zbigniew Brzezinski, and you look at his training by the CIA, and you look at how, in many ways, he's a mirror image to Ted Kaczynski. He was the subject of experiments. In many ways, he was a remarkable man. It's not to say I admire him or endorse him or anything like that. But you have to acknowledge he was very intelligent. In some ways, he was very connected. His family, in fact, is very wealthy. I think his niece or something is going around supporting Trump or whatever. The point being, you have all this experimentation going on, and you get this fanaticism. And so it's been around for a while. We had kidnapping of Israelis during the Olympics in the 1970s, and we've had Islamic terrorism, and it sort of was simmering for a while, and then it would flare up, and then it would simmer. In the same way, we've had race riots in this country, and they've flared up, and they've simmered, and they've flared up and simmered. And so we've had this for a while now, since the end of the Second World War and the shifting paradigm that came out of that. So we've had this for a while. And the question is, much in the same way that Islamic terrorism has sort of died down to an extent, at least in the United States, we haven't really had much since, I believe, San Bernardino and the night, the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting. We haven't had much since then. It's been kind of quiet for a few years. So is that what's going to happen with anti-racism? Will that sort of quiet down and settle down for a few years? Will it be something else? Then you look at the parallel issue of transgender rights. Have those already been achieved? I mean, what more is it? I'm curious. I mean, what is it? Is it the employment rights in the military? The right for transgender people to serve in the military? But then it's not going to be enough to simply have the right. They need to be president, right? We need to take a MK Ultra puppet, someone who has no ability for independent thought, or they can't really say anything that's not from a teleprompter. They can't say anything that's not a memorized Fed line. Someone like a Pete Buttigieg. I remember Mark Rubio, when he got interrupted by Chris Christie in the 2016 debates, Rubio starts repeating himself like a robot. And Christie, to his credit, points out this type, this political type. So you can find someone, I suppose, who's transgender, and you can call them the president, and then they're up there as the symbolic leader of the country. That word doesn't even feel comfortable to me to say, the word leader, in that context. Really, the word leader, I mean, that is a masculine term in the same, you've got a waiter and you've got a waitress, but we don't talk about a leadress, right? We don't say a leader and a leadress. The term leader, even there, I mean, there's something deeply embedded in our language that, in fact, the professor class, the priest class, recognizes that our language is fundamentally gendered. And so we have deeply, and Noam Chomsky recognized this, that so much of our culture and our morality from thousands of years ago is deeply embedded in our language. And so you can come along and you can try to eliminate it superficially, but it's still there implicitly, sort of in the poetry of how we speak. Certain things come naturally to say, like leader. When I say the word leader, that word, in a sense, is gendered. Now, there are some other words maybe that are not so gendered at this point. Runner, for instance, if I say runner, you might think of a female runner, because I don't know. I think the world of running, I'd have to see the statistics, but to my mind, there are a lot of female runners. It's perhaps not the best example, but the general point stands that there's so much to destroy, right? There's an endless amount of things to destroy. There's an endless amount of statues. I mean, we can literally rip down, we can destroy everything. We can break it down brick by brick. We can completely deconstruct our society. We can pave over all of the wild lands, and we can make the whole thing a giant parking lot. And still, there will be some conception of, oh, well, but, lurking underneath our beautiful utopian parking lot is the ruins of the previous evil civilization, so we have to dig it up. Sort of like what they say, oh, I don't know if I should go into that. We're going to table that analogy. Forget that analogy. If you know where I was going, then you know where I was going. But we're going to table that analogy. We're going to try to bring it back to YouTube land. And we're going to say, they're going to be setting off nuclear bombs. They are going to be setting off nuclear bombs to destroy cities because those cities were built by people of color and the labor wasn't fair or something. We're going to have to destroy the world with nuclear bombs. I mean, this is the kind of situation you get into. It's really interesting, actually, the character of Thanos from the Avengers, and how you saw this complaining. You saw this complaining where they would say things like, it's actually really dangerous. It's actually very problematic, the way people identify with Thanos. Thanos is not an environmentalist. Thanos is not a good guy. I was thinking about Neil deGrasse Tyson, and a moment that he had, I think he had sort of an anti-feminist, a Me Too moment. And I was thinking about how Neil deGrasse Tyson could have come out as a Trump supporter. And he could have said, I disagree with Trump on XYZ, but he's going to support NASA, and that's what matters. And I was thinking of the kind of speech that a Neil deGrasse Tyson could give and say, I'm Black Science Man and I support Trump. And he could do that kind of thing. And he could include in his speech something about immigration and say, look, there is no world in which bringing more people into our country decreases CO2 emissions. If that's what you're concerned about, and I'm more concerned with pollution, I'm more concerned with wildlife preservation, I'm more concerned with creeping suburbanization of the country. But if you're concerned simply with CO2, there is no situation in which more immigrants means less CO2. There's absolutely no. And so you're telling me that, a lockdown that was started supposedly to save lives, we have to keep it in place so that we can reduce the human population. This is what I'm hearing from Germany, that they're like, well, we found out that when we lock people in their homes, they drive less cars. So to save the environment, I know, you're going to kill yourself, you're going to be miserable, but it's for the good of the environment. Wait a second, why doesn't that apply to immigrants? Wait a second, it's totally inconsistent. It's totally hypocritical. And someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson could point that out, and he could be a hero to many people. He would probably lose his current audience, but, someone could do that. But there's not a lot of incentives to do that. I really don't even think Trump ever made that argument. I don't really ever think that anybody who was one of these mainstream, none of the people who have really survived all of the purges and the permutations of his movement, I don't think really anyone makes that kind of argument anymore. And it's sad. It's sad to think that there are these political games being played, and the involvement that we have with them is so much like the sports fan setting cars on fire because his team lost, or even the sports fan cheering in the stands. We have this belief that if we cheer in the stands, that our team will have a better chance. It's intuitive to us that the louder we scream, the more moralized our team will be, and therefore the better chance they have to win. And that, honestly, that seems to be true in some cases. It seems to be true, if you go to the gym and you have a bunch of people cheering you on, you're probably going to work out harder than if you go to the gym and it's crickets, or you go to the gym and people are making ugly faces at you and saying, why aren't you wearing a shirt? You probably are going to be more effective if you feel that kind of peer support. And so people feel this need to be involved in politics as a cheerleader. We have to cheerlead, we have to hope and dream. There's that scene from Dragon Ball Z where they say, give me your energy, people of Earth. And then they're cheering for Satan. If you actually watch the scene, it's quite sad that they have that in Dragon Ball Z. It puts a sour taste in my mouth that all the people are like cheering. The way they do it is they have a character called Mr. Satan, and then it's like, why would you name the character Mr. Satan? Maybe it means something different in Japanese, but for the English version, for the dub, they're cheering for Mr. Satan, and they're saying, give me your energy, people of Earth. It's something perverse. It's something that would take an otherwise wholesome movement. It's a good idea, right? It's a good idea. You have the hero, and he's gathering all the energy of the people of Earth. It's a good idea. I think of Siegfried. I think of Siegfried and his heroism, and I think of how Siegfried, I don't know everything about Siegfried. Maybe he did get the chicks. But I think of the concept of heroism that you see in a character like Siegfried versus the concept of masculinity that remains to us, which is much about attracting women. Is Siegfried as an archetype, is he attractive to women? I think so. I think if you do good things and you are heroic, you will be attractive to women as a kind of side effect. You do the right thing and, women sort of follow. That seems good and that seems likely. But, there's been this kind of dislocation in the same way that sex has been dislocated from reproduction, and now we're at a point where sex has been dislocated from sociality, where it's become this virtual thing. In the same way, I feel that attracting women used to be the kind of reward for being a masculine man, and now we've sort of flipped things on its head so that attracting women is the goal, and then as a side, it's like I want to attract women, and so as a side effect, I'm going to get strong, rather than I need to get strong because I'm part of a Männerbund. I need to get strong because I'm part of the army. I need to get strong because I'm a farmer. I need to get strong because I like playing sports. There's a lot of reasons to get strong, and none of them really, in their origins, I think. I mean, can you imagine? I suppose, do animals do this? Do animals do you see chimps doing push-ups because they want to attract a mate, or do they just sort of play? I mean, on some level, the things are connected. I'm not saying there's no connection between reproductive strategies and other kinds of behaviors, right? The concept of heroism, there's probably a reproductive strategy built into that. But the consciousness that we have about it, the kind of anxiety that we have, the kind of sexual anxiety where we're no longer sort of living the good life and as a result attracting women, but it's almost as if the concept of the good life has been depleted and there is no such thing as the good life anymore. And there's no justification, and everything has to be justified in terms of, does this or does this not appeal to women? You know, does my body type appeal to women? And this is where you get guys on things like steroids. I mean, of course, it's used competitively in competitions to give people an edge, but you've got people who are not athletes who are taking steroids because they want to look good. And it's kind of sad because a lot of times we look at women and they're wearing the most ridiculous outfits, and then they'll post a description, just because I wear this or that, I'm not doing this for men, I'm not doing this for attention, I'm doing it for me. And we look at that and we think, it's either a sad act of delusion, self-delusion, or it's a sad act of deception. Either way, there's something deeply sad about that. If you're going to put yourself out there in that way, own it and say, hey, I'm, subscribe to my OnlyFans, just be honest with me. Don't lie to yourself, don't lie to other people. But I think men do the same thing. I think men live lives where they're taking steroids or just trying to make money or whatever they think is going to attract women. And they never stop, and they never realize, and they never come to this understanding of, like, this is a kind of fanatical simping. We think of simping as the kind of guy who, the girl puts up the Instagram post and she says, I'm not doing this for anybody else, I'm posting this for myself. I'm posting it on social media purely for my own aesthetical satisfaction or something. I mean, it's totally incoherent. We think of the simp as the guy in the replies who says, you go girl, don't listen to those mean guys, I love you, please respond. We think of that as simping. That's merely the exoteric simp. That is the surface level simp. That is the obvious simp, the explicit simp. But I think simping has become a pervasive religion that underlies a huge majority of the male population is thinking about, I'm an incel, or how can I get women to like me, or what do I do? How do I change myself to make myself more popular with women? You have a whole manosphere industry that's built around the concept of either resentful of the fact that women are not receptive to your simping, or trying to solve this unsatiable quench for approval from women through a vast quantity of women. It's like, well, I didn't get approval from my parents, I didn't get approval from society, and so maybe if I have sex with women, that means that they like me. And if I have sex with one of them, maybe that's not enough, maybe it's a sort of one and done and I still feel empty. But maybe if I have sex with a lot of them, I just increase the quantity, then I'll feel good. And that is a kind of religion, as much as the anti-racism, trans rights, as much as that is a religion. I think that this kind of worship of women is a kind of religion. The idea that somehow if we get female approval, then everything will be all right. Again, much in the way that anti-racism and trans rights has an ancient history to it and a lineage that you can trace and you can understand how it came seemingly from nothing. It actually came from something. We can understand that. But in the same way, this desire for female approval, that's quite ancient in its own way. And the technology that was invented to kind of deal with this problem was monogamy. It said, well, we're going to have monogamy. One man, one woman, get married, and then, essentially they're in a situation where the man, his desire for female approval is restricted. He can't go out sort of narcissistically and try to be the Adonis and try to be the playboy. He's restricted. And the woman is basically forced, despite her desire for endless hypergamy, she's forced to just settle and be the wife to the man. And so the people are basically put in this tolerable state where they're not hyperstimulated all the time with new partners, but they've got some kind of stability. And that allows them to then pursue other things. The woman can take care of the kids. The man can pursue his role as proletariat or as aristocrat, and he can use all of that energy that, we today are using on attracting women. He can instead use that toward productive means. The men who are not using all of their energy to attract women often are using that energy to resent women, right? And it's somewhat inescapable. I mean, you can complain about it. You can say, well, it shouldn't be. You should not resent women. You can sort of finger wag at people and tell them that's not a very productive thing to do. But they're two sides of the same coin. People resent women because they don't have access to them. People are obsessed with women because, they get that dopamine hit and they want more of it. And so it's really the same thing. It's this woman-centered religion that comes out of, you could say it has a more basic animal component to it, but the way that it pervades our thought and our thinking, and it eliminates the potential for a genuine heroism. Heroism cannot be in the service of direct attention from women. There's a scene in the Aeneid where Aeneas goes to Carthage and he meets the queen of Carthage, Dido, and they get together. And then he says, look, Dido, you're great and all, and I could stay here and you would, shower me with gifts and worship me and whatever. But I have a bigger quest, and that's what makes Aeneas a hero, is he says, this is nice. He gets a taste of it. What makes him heroic is he can say, I need to move on from that. That's a stage of my life I had to go through. That's, a desire all men have. I went through it, but I still have a quest. I have a duty to my father and to my descendants. I have to found the city of Rome. That's my destiny. You might not understand that. You don't get it. I have to leave. You're going to be sad. I think she even ends up like burning herself in a fire or something. She gets pretty extreme with the crazy ex vibes. But eventually Aeneas has to leave. And that's, I think, collectively, when people talk about men going their own way, there's two ways of using that term. There's a way that might be productive, and there's the way I feel it's commonly used, which is negative, which is resentment. If you resent women, then that is just the negative worship of women. You're thinking about them, you're thinking about how they're the cause of every bad thing, you're attacking them, you think harassing them, you think making them cry is going to make your life better. And there's a component of, well, I can't even use these words because this is how I got suspended from Twitter. And I still can't get back on my Twitter. Well, I can view my Twitter account. I cannot view my messages. I can't view my bookmarks. I have thousands of bookmarks. I don't know what to do. I sent an email. We'll see what happens. But I got suspended for Twitter, and so we have to be so careful with our language. And I already am so careful, but I have to self-censor to the point that it's clownish. It's ridiculous. What I'm trying to say is that when people apply negative social pressure, that's an effective means of social control. That's an effective means of enforcing morality and ethics. And so that's necessary in any kind of moral or ethical system you're going to have. But in some ways, when you're not the dominant, moral or ethical faction, and you do that, there's diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns to bullying liberals online. There's a diminishing return to bullying women online. And I, of course, I'm anti-bullying, for the record. I'm totally against it. I believe we should never have any negative social pressure, bullying or any otherwise. We should have a totally anarchic vacuum. But if you're doing it, you have to recognize that it has diminishing returns. And that the resentment of all of these bureaucratic groups, they are not who rule you. Bureaucrats ultimately are not the rulers of this world. Bureaucrats are the servants of the rulers of this world. So you can attack the bureaucrats all you want, and you can make them cry, and you can feel a kind of victory. And I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it, the desire. I try not to engage in it, but I feel the desire when I see people acting ridiculous. When I see one person wearing a shirt and one person not. And it's like you live in the same house, and one person's wearing a shirt and one person isn't wearing a shirt, and you live in the same house. I want to say something, and not in a very nice way either, and not in a helpful way, not in a like, hey, I see you there, and you're kind of doing something weird, and you're buying into a religious craze, and for your own sake, for your own help, I just want to say something nice. I want to give you a little advice. No, I want to punish these people. I feel that desire. I feel because I have been punished. I have been punished for not being part of their religion. I have been punished. I have been persecuted. And so I feel the need to return the volley. I feel the need to... You have to respond to these things. If you simply absorb the negativity, there are limits to that. When you simply, the negativity comes at you, the persecution comes at you, the censorship comes at you, and there's only so much of that people can take. We have to find a healthy outlet for that. And the healthy outlet, unfortunately, is not screaming at people on the streets. I wish that would solve something because it's within our power. I wish harassing people on Twitter was something productive. It's not. So we can't endorse that. But we have to recognize that the negativity that's coming at us, it has to be dealt with, it has to be processed, and it has to be expressed in one way or another. And the way in which we express it is impactful. It matters. It distorts our vision of reality. If we believe implicitly that by attacking people on the streets, online, whatever, if we believe that's moving the needle in our direction, we have to really check our assumptions, because there's a deep bias that we have to believe that when we're attacked, we should counterattack. And it's such a basic psychological mechanism. When someone hits you, you hit back. But we have to understand that within an informational conflict, that is not always as simple as it appears. When you simply react in that, when you are a reactionary, when you are a conservative, when you're under attack and you push back or you stand your ground and you react, that's ultimately not going to have the kind of positive impact that you think it's going to have. We have to deal with that energy, though. We have to direct it in a way that does have a hope of being productive. And what does productivity mean? It means that we are building, to the best of our ability, something which is positive. It means that we are not simply creating attention by glomming on to whatever is most readily available. I think Milo made a post, I don't follow him, but I heard that he was complaining about Trump. I heard he said something like, Trump has destroyed, Alex said a similar thing. He said, Trump has destroyed me. My support for Trump has ruined my life. Because what it did is it made me a target, because all of these people, all of this volunteer army of bureaucrats and moralists, they came after me. They sued me. They took my money. They got me banned. They got me taken down. They shut down my source of income. They froze my credit cards. They said I couldn't speak at a university. They made a protest. They made a riot. They made it unsafe for me to live in one place, that now I have to have bodyguards everywhere. And you can go on and on with these people about how there was a moment in history in 2016, and maybe slightly before and maybe slightly after, where you could associate yourself with Trump, and there were huge consequences to that. And so at the time, people looked at that and they said, this is a great opportunity. Trump, he may not be everything that we say he is. He may not be the God Emperor. But if we attach ourselves to him, he's sort of a wave, and we're like surfers, and we're riding the wave, and then we'll get a bigger audience, and then we'll get to sort of the next hill. He'll sort of take us from point A to point B, and then we'll be at point B. And then what happens after that is maybe things will slow down, maybe things will calm down, we won't have all the energy, things will sort of simmer, but we'll be in a better place. We'll move from point A to point B, and then we'll wait a little bit, and then maybe we'll get someone else, maybe a Tucker Carlson, then he'll take us from B to C, and we'll sort of leapfrog using these mediocre, mainstream, Hindenburg-esque figures who are kind of lame and old and not that exciting, in all honesty, but we'll take these little moments of controversy that are created by the mainstream, that without the mainstream media, they wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be controversial without the mainstream telling us that we're supposed to be upset about this and that. When Melania wears a shirt saying, I don't care, or whatever. It's like, that's not impactful. That doesn't change the world. That doesn't change our class structure. That doesn't change our religious structure. I don't care. But the media cares. And a lot of people said, well, if the media cares, that's enough for me. That's enough to grab the attention of an audience. We'll go from point A to point B, and then we'll take it from there. The problem with that is waves in water are not tide. There's a difference between the waves and the tide. When you look at a point, there's digital visualizations of this. When you look at a point and a wave, the wave comes along and it goes up and then it comes down. That point goes straight up and it comes straight down. It doesn't actually move forward. We view the waves as progressing in a certain direction. And this is true in terms of all kinds of waves. If you take a jump rope, right, and you take the jump rope and you whip the jump rope, it appears like that wave is moving forward. But the jump rope actually stays in place, right? When you whip a jump rope up and down, it doesn't actually move forward. In some ways, the wave is illusory. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, frankly, with some of these people who associated themselves with Trump. It remains to be seen for all of them. It's not an absolute statement about recent history, but it's an observation that it wasn't simply point A to point B. It was, people went from, no one heard of Milo. Alex had an audience, some people had an audience, but you took people, some people were in complete obscurity. Some people didn't exist on the map. And then all of a sudden they're on TV and they're part of the national conversation. And now we're seeing back to, well, obscurity again. So you look at that kind of rise and fall, and for some people maybe it works out. I'm not saying it's a disaster in every case. But that kind of thinking, whatever is the most offensive thing that I can say at the moment, whatever is the flashiest thing I can say, whatever sort of controversy I can attach myself to, in a short-term strategy, there's ways of drumming up drama that will gain you an audience. But the problem with that is if you then create an expectation and you structure your life around the idea that you have this audience, it can be taken from you. The audience is not yours. The audience is the platform's, and you don't control the platform. You don't, whether the platform is speaking at a university, whether the platform is here on YouTube, it doesn't matter where it is. Even the platform in terms of your bank account, it's not yours. You don't own anything. They said that communism was about stripping our private property. Well, in a sense, you don't have private property, right? When we look at what happened with Henry VIII and the confiscation of the monasteries, he said, you know what, Catholic Church, you're not a legitimate property owner. I can just take it. And that's kind of what's happening to people who don't follow the new religion. It's like, well, you don't believe X, Y, and Z. Oh, well, just take it. You don't have rights to speech. You don't have rights to money. You don't have rights to much of anything. Maybe you can go and apply for welfare with the government. Maybe you can apply for unemployment or something like that. You can live at the bottom of society now. It is a little bit of an exaggeration right now for people to say, oh, my children will be starving. Well, we don't really have starvation in America. Even if you're not allowed to have a job, it's still difficult to starve in America. With the combination of government, food banks, and then you've got churches out there that are giving away food, it's actually difficult. You actually kind of have to have mental problems to the point where you're neglecting your children to the point where they're not getting enough calories. Now, in terms of healthy food, food that's not loaded with pesticides, that's not loaded with vegetable oils, that's another issue. And the fact is that the poorest people in America, the kids aren't starving, they're fat. Why are they fat? They're fat because they're not moving their bodies. Why aren't they moving their bodies? Because they're mentally sick. And why are they mentally sick? Well, a number of reasons, but one of them is their diet's making them mentally sick, and so they're not moving. If you take a human body and you fill it with 2,000 calories a day, but it's not moving around, it will become fat. And there are some foods and a hormonal chemical state you put the body in where instead of regulating itself in a way that you're building muscle, it's not going to build muscle, it's going to build fat. And everything becomes exhausting. You get these people who are eating so much food and they're depleted of energy. You'd think, well, you're eating calories. Calories is energy. The more you eat, the more energetic you should feel. But that's not actually true. You can eat a lot of food and feel even lazier. Now, some food you eat, if you're eating carrot juice, if you're eating delicious carrot juice, then, you're going to feel energized. I'm pumped up. I'm energized. I'm full of energy. Let's see what's going on over here. Complaining is something like anti-prayer, true. Liking the new camera. The defining characteristic, well, I don't think that's true. All political ideology is anti-God. There's something to that. Political ideology is religious, and real religions are, different religions are not compatible. They make truth statements. I was going to talk a little bit about the concept of the pagan gods as being historical people. Like, there are people who call themselves conservatives and they revere George Washington. They say, George Washington was a great man. We revere George Washington, and we're also monotheistic. I view the same thing of the pagan gods. Those guys were probably at some point real people. What's the difference? Tell me, what's the difference between revering the gods of your ancestors and revering George Washington? Now, just because the Hebrew Bible talks about the idols, what is a statue but an idol? What's the difference between making a statue of Baal, which simply means Lord? That's simply the Semitic term for Lord. It doesn't mean anything else. I'm not sure about Moloch, but those are the two big ones they talk about. And you have this god, and they make a statue of the god. What's the difference between that and making a statue of George Washington? In 1,000 years, who's to say that our conception of George Washington is going to really be anything other than a mystical conception or a religious conception, or mythical conception, I should say. And so that's how I kind of perceive these things. And you have this Hebrew Bible, and you have this hyper-urbanization that went on in the Middle East, and you had this concept of monotheism and the iconoclasm, and they want to destroy all the other gods, and they want to rip everything apart, and they want to pave over the Middle East, and they want to, destroy any kind of recognition that Yahweh, as a religious figure, has developed out of other religious figures, and that religions progress over time. But there is that kind of iconoclastic fanaticism that you get with monotheism, that even you look at the dualism of Zoroaster, and that has the same thing. People like to look at Nietzsche, likes to point out Zoroaster in a positive. He likes to say, oh, the wisdom of the East, the wisdom of Asia, and he's talking about Zoroaster. But Zoroaster was a priestly fanatic, and he wanted to destroy the devas, and he called them demons. He said the devas, those are demons. But to the preceding people, we would call them akin to the Hindus, but they lived in Iran. Iran used to essentially follow a religion that was not too dissimilar from Hinduism. They had all these gods, and they called them the devas. And Zoroaster came in, he said all of those so-called devas are all demons. They're all evil. And so he really started that trend probably before Judaism. The roots were there. You say the cult of Ra, Aten Ra in Egypt is a similar thing. And you see various people have praised, these early monotheistic cults or dualistic cults, this reduction of religious forms into a centralized dualist or monotheist, compacted, simplified orientation, kind of eliminates the mythic cultural embeddedness of a polytheistic perspective that organically emerges over time. Like, we have a pantheon of the founding fathers. We don't say that we worship George Washington above all and all the other founding fathers are evil. No, they're all good founding fathers. They were all different, Obviously, Jefferson is different from Franklin, is different from Washington. They're all different. They all have different aspects. Franklin is kind of the fat nerd with glasses, which is cool. We love fat nerds with glasses. And then George Washington, he's like the Chad 6'4", beast with the whip, and he's whipping the soldiers. And then you've got, Jefferson, and he's like the farmer aristocrat. And you've got Madison, and I don't know what he does. He likes to write things. Thomas Paine, he's shouting on the streets with a megaphone. So you've got all these different characters, and that is the kind of sort of organic polytheism that develops when you have an organic kind of cultural development that's based on real organizations of men coming together. Some people would dispute the existence of the Greek pantheon. They say, well, there was no such thing as Zeus and Poseidon, and we can see how Poseidon used to be the god of horses, and then he became the god of ocean. Obviously, he's not based on a real person because he evolved as a mythic character over time, long after whoever Poseidon originally was would have supposedly died, so that's not even possible. And of course, there was even controversy in the Hellenistic period where they actually had a tomb of Zeus, I believe on Crete, where they said, here lies King Zeus. And so some people would say, okay, well, Zeus was an actual king of Crete, and he was a real man. And then other people would come along later who were sort of influenced by Pythagoras and Plato to say that's sacrilegious because Zeus he's not dead, right? So he can't be buried in Crete. He's not a real person. He's a god. So there was even that disagreement back then about how figures like Zeus should be viewed, the concept of the historical myth versus the kind of transcendent myth, and the tension between polytheism and monotheism. I think in a way you can't eliminate monotheism. I think people who seek to eliminate it and to go back to polytheism are misguided in the sense that they're just not recognizing, in a Kaczynskiite way, they're not recognizing the technology of monotheism, and that you really can't get around that. You can't escape the power of centralization. You're always going to have that component. It will reemerge in some way, and we see the cycles of history. We don't know at some point, where does that begin? Where does that truly start? Is our record incomplete because, we're only looking at the written record and the archaeological record? Is it possible that you had such cycles of polytheism and monotheism even among, say, Neanderthals or something like that? It's possible. We don't know about these kind of prehistorical religious ideas. But as far as we know, we can connect the development of monotheism with writing and markets and governance and agriculture. So we can see a correlation. We can form an idea that, those technologies gave rise to monotheism and that they are in some ways interchangeable, that you cannot have agriculture and written language and not have some kind of monotheism, even if it's not popular, even if it's a hidden cult like the mystery cult. You're still going to have that at some point in your society. So I don't think you can flip the script on the monotheists and say, oh, you're going to burn the sacred grove? Well, now we're going to destroy monotheism and bring back polytheism. I don't think you're going to be successful in that, but I also don't think you're going to be successful in the monotheists. They want to eliminate polytheism, but that's also, as much as monotheism is embedded in the written word, polytheism is embedded in our concept of hierarchy and organization, that we're going to have the concept of the family, and that's going to give rise to multiplicity. So, those things are going to be in tension, and I wish that we didn't have an elite that was trying to kill everybody so that we could come to a more, salubrious conception of religion and myth that, would not be designed to make people miserable and hate one another, but would be designed to sort of bring people together in the same way I think that really was the intention of Christianity, was to bring people together. And of course it did have its own destructive component, but I think Zoroastrianism was similar. I think Zoroaster was trying to bring together ancient Persia in a united political and religious organization, and in doing so, there was destruction involved in that. I don't know, where that cycle begins and ends. After everyone congregated to big social media sites, it was easy to censor because the alternatives are with 1% of the traffic. You comply or no one hears you. Samurai shaving the front of their heads is another example. Okay, yeah. The samurai shaving the heads. I know that the Manchus have their own kind of tonsure where you shave the front of the head and then you simply allow the back to grow out in a braid, but that's the Chinese example. I know that the samurai, they have a bun at the back of their head. So they have their own style that shows that they are separate from the average person. With the Manchu, they enforced it on the other Chinese to say that we're having Manchu supremacy, and it was a kind of humiliation against the average Chinese who were Han Chinese, not Manchu. But with the samurai, I think it's more like we're of a higher type. We are distinct from you. And I actually don't know too much about the samurai hairstyle, because when I see depictions of it, it actually simply looks like the artistic depiction of people who have large foreheads. I actually didn't know that the samurai were actually shaving the front of their heads. So I don't know too much about it, but it does kind of make sense because the samurai they were a spiritual order. The West has lost the ability to suppress deviant behaviors. That's not true. That's simply not true. This is the problem with your conservative narrative. You are suggesting that we have lost the ability to suppress behaviors. What is censorship? That is the ability to suppress behaviors. That has nothing to do with the ability. This Spenglerian conception, oh, the West is weak, we're dying, we can't do anything. That's totally wrong. We are so powerful that we're not only censoring here at home, but we're going to Zambia and telling them that they have to comply with our conception of culture that's so alien to them. We have total global control. Nobody's ever had the ability to suppress behaviors like we have today. It's not a question of our ability to suppress behaviors. It's a question of who defines deviancy. What class defines the deviancy? So you're totally off. Romans and Greeks had powerful civilizations without Christian notions of sexual morality. Again, you're totally wrong and uneducated. You don't know what you're talking about. The Greeks and Romans had very powerful and strict notions of sexuality. Women who were actresses were considered prostitutes. That's a form of sexual morality. They had a very strict conception. Now, was it identical to then Christian, especially with regards to, say, the Greeks? They had their pederasty, which is totally alien to us. Hopefully it's alien to us. And I've gone over why they had that and where that came from. The Romans also had a conception of war rape, man-on-man war rape, that I think in some capacity you look at what happened with the Iraq War and some of the war crimes, and I think war rape still exists, but it was something that was more open with the Romans. That with the Christians, you weren't supposed to, you fight a Christian war. St. Augustine says it's a just war, it's a Christian war, whatever. You have a war between Christians, or even if it's a war against infidels, Muslims, you're not supposed to rape the conquered people. But with the Romans, they did not have that. Their sadism was not as restricted by Christian morality, but it doesn't mean that they didn't have sexual morality. Because absolutely, it was shameful for a man to be penetrated in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. That was a destruction of your masculinity. So don't tell me that they didn't have a sexual morality. The toga, and you read about what they said about the Athenians versus the Spartans. There were differences even within these little city-states. The Athenians were remarkably puritanical and strict about their sexual morality, what you could wear, what you couldn't wear. It didn't mean that they didn't also practice nudism in the same way that in Germany, in, say, the 20th century and even today, you have a healthy, it's called the FKK. They have Freikörper culture, or Kultur. I'm mixing my English with my German. The free body culture, they have a nudism, but you also, that's at the beach, right? You don't go to your work, you don't go to your job nude. So they still have sexual morality. I mean, we have transgender ideology is a kind of sexual morality. So we have sexual morality today. The ancient Greeks and Romans had sexual morality, and there's a tremendous amount of overlap. We can look at the differences and we can focus on those and say, oh, it's totally different. But you're implying, because when I talk about sexual morality in this discussion, I'm talking about the way in which we restrict our desire. If you're a woman, to get male attention, if you're a man, to get female attention, we restrict that desire so that we can do productive things. You're somehow implying that these people were libertines. If you're contradicting my argument, I don't know what the points being made here are. The liberal will more than likely sum up the position of being in favor of sexual minority behavior under the pretense of thinking it as a pro-tolerance middle approach. Romans were sexually reserved, correct. H being the letter for LGBTQ. You can have your hetero family, just let us have your same-sex family. Porn being defended as a free speech issue started in the 60s was bound to destroy social conservative reaction to it because conservatism had become impotent due to Buckley's influence. Well, Buckley was promoted by other people, so you can't put all the blame on Buckley was not a billionaire. Buckley did not invent, he was appointed. So, I mean, he's a neat sort of figure to throw out there. You can name drop Buckley and say it was all Buckley's fault, but the issues are so much deeper than that. Google Trends are, I mean, people think that somehow if Buckley was refuted or denied or denounced, or if Buckley wasn't born, he changed the world of history by being this little annoying, I don't know, librarian type going around and cataloging what's conservative and what's not, that somehow Buckley invented all of this. It's so much deeper than that. And so I feel that when we reduce, it's in the same way when Jordan Peterson goes and says, the problem today is postmodernism, as if there was no problem with modernism, as if one thing doesn't lead to the other. And I'd actually like to hear somebody ask him that question. Maybe he's already been asked. I don't think he's going to have a good answer. It's like, so you denounce postmodernism, and you also say the 20th century was horrible, which was modernism. So where exactly, are you a pre-modern? Are you in favor of, ancient Greece? What are you in favor of exactly? He never wants to give you some kind of positive conception of what we should have. They're too simplistic. It's too simplistic. My oversimplification of everything is class. You have a merchant class, and that's where all of these disruptive incentives come from. They don't come from Buckley. They don't come from postmodernism. those are like leaves on a tree. The trunk is the merchant class, or the roots, whatever the anatomy of this thing is. That's the source. It's the merchant class. And you can look at how did the merchant class come to power, but Google trend searching for BLM and George Floyd have been on rapid decline. Yeah, so that's probably supporting evidence that a lot of this stuff that seemed to take over society, like it's the new religion, can just as quickly as it can rise up, it can also just disappear. Blair White is interesting. She dogmatically aligns with conservative talking points, has made many enemies, for instance, with Vaush. I don't actually think it's that interesting. I wonder if cultures with much more gendered language, like Romance languages, are experiencing the same gender bending. Everyone's experiencing gender bending. I don't actually know how direct and quantitative an analysis you could do, because I know, for example, Swedish is a gendered language where they've introduced hen, which is a gender-neutral pronoun to use. So I know in Scandinavia they're trying to aggressively degender their language, but it's a difficult process. It would be hard to prove. It would be hard to say, I mean, English, we have gendered pronouns, but we don't gender our nouns as rigorously as the Germans. But the Germans, even though they have a more gendered language, gender ideology in Germany, their gender neutrality is probably more advanced than ours. You can have a contradiction in terms of, let's say that gendered language is a force. It is a force of gendering. But then you also have social ideology, which is a force of gender bending. And they sort of come up against each other, and they reach a certain velocity of cultural change. And I think in Germany, even though they have a more gendered language, at the same time, their gender ideology is powerful enough that they're probably further along than the United States. That's my opinion. Like they dug up Franco. Oh man, Franco, what an interesting guy. I did a talk with him today on DLive about how Franco sided with Admiral Canaris, who was part of a precursor to the FBI. So, I don't know, when people talk about digging up Franco, I'm fine with digging up Franco, to be honest. I don't support him either way. I don't support fascism. I don't support Franco. I don't see what the problem with that. But just the general thing of you have a religious fanaticism where they want to nuke the cemeteries. And the general point is that the more you try to eliminate the religion, the more you call yourself an atheist, the more fanatical people you become. The least religious people in this country are generally people who call themselves Christians. It's like, what's your religion? Oh, well, I was raised Christian. That's the response they'll give you. Or they'll say, I think there's like a God out there or something. Those are the least religious people. The most religious people are the ones who say, I'm an atheist. Atheism, and that's how I was. I was a very religious person, and I thought I was the least religious person on earth because I defined religion as falsehood, and I believed that I had access to absolute scientific truth, and I was 100% sure, and I just wanted to eliminate all the religious people in the world, and that was my opinion. I was a very religious person, but I was convinced that I wasn't. You have languages like Arabic where Allah is built into every expression. You'll read a tract in Arabic that inadvertently invokes the name of God over and over. Yeah, that's intentional, by the way. The Muslim scholars basically engineered Islamic culture to be inseparable from Allah. Like, we used to have this in Christian culture. Used to say, Godspeed and God wills it, and, for God's sakes, and, God willing. Those used to be common expressions. But basically through a process of people like Nietzsche and precursors to him, Bruno Bauer, that whole movement. We even talked today about Rudolph II. Rudolph II denied his last rites. It would be normal for a Christian king. The bishop comes to you and says, you're about to die. You want me to read your last rites? He's like, no, get away from me. So, and that goes back to the 1600s and even 1500s when people like Tycho Brahe and Kepler were messing with astronomy. and he was an alchemist. So it goes way back before Nietzsche that you had a European aristocracy that was trying to invoke humanism and try to remove Christianity from the continent. The modern left is no different than the Russian or Spanish Bolsheviks. I mean, the Hebrews did it, the Zoroastrians did it. It's a very ancient practice of iconoclasm. Why do you fantasize about being Neil deGrasse Tyson? No, I don't want to be him. I want to write a speech for him. Because I think it would be fun. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson as a Trump supporter would be fun. I just think the argument is so easy to make about immigration. In what world does more immigrants mean less CO2? How does that make sense? You say we have to shut down everything. We have to eliminate 90% of the population because of CO2. Okay, well, let's start with reducing immigration, right? It's so easy, but, it's like people's eyes glaze over because they're not capable of critical thinking. For them, justifications are things that they receive on high and they repeat. They can't actually think for themselves and say, okay, we have a problem with CO2. What are we going to do about it? Maybe we should have less immigration. No, that would never come. And if you tell that to people, they'll just, it will go in one ear and out the other. It won't process. They might say, oh, that's really interesting. They'll forget about it the next day. Because you're either on the conservative side that doesn't care about the environment and thinks pollution is great, or you're on the liberal side where, to eliminate CO2, we need more immigrants or something. They never connect those two talking points together, but they simultaneously hold them because they simply receive the dogma. They don't question the dogma. To the extent that they defend the dogma, they just use the lines that they're fed. In some ways, we criticize people like Marco Rubio and Pete Buttigieg, but the vast majority of people are probably even worse on some level. And that sounds harsh, and maybe it's not even true, but in the same way, Marco Rubio is polished. If I go up to Marco Rubio and I say, why can't we give stimulus checks? Or what? I don't know how he voted on the latest bill, but let's say he voted against it. You say, why can't we give people stimulus checks? He has a canned response for everything. But in the same way, you talk to a normal political person, someone who's a political activist, and they think, oh, I'm going to unfriend you on Facebook if you don't have my political views. And you say, well, why do you support what you support? They're going to give you canned answers, but the canned answers are going to be rotten. It's going to be a can of, stinky tuna. It's going to be a can with puncture holes in it that smells and it's got worms in it. That's the kind of canned response. It's not going to be the polished Marco Rubio response. It's going to be convoluted, confusing. They're going to tell you something in one sentence. They're going to contradict themselves in the next sentence. But it's just a series of canned, and this is where the NPC meme comes from. Because you ask people, why do you believe what you believe? And it's just like incoherent nonsense that they didn't even come up from themselves. They heard in a Hollywood movie somewhere. Would you rather be Neil deGrasse Tyson, Mike Tyson, or Tyson Fury? Well, Tyson Fury isn't he a boxer? Mike Tyson is, I guess he's still, it was funny because he did that interview with Joe Rogan where he's like, I can't even impersonate. It's not polite to impersonate a person of Mike Tyson-ness. But, I can't impersonate his voice. But he says, oh, I'm never going to box again. And then he's back and he's boxing. He gave this whole impassioned, oh, I could never do it. I'm not a violent man anymore. I'm a peace lover. I had a change. I had a spiritual awakening. And then he's boxing again. So you can take Mike Tyson out of the ring, but you can't take the ring out of Mike Tyson, I guess. Yeah, but it would be funny to be Neil deGrasse Tyson and make anti-immigrant arguments. It would be entertaining. Tyson Fury, you go around, you're punching people, and Mr. Satan is just the character's name. His real name is Mark. Yeah, well, they should have used Mark instead of Satan, because it just ruins the scene for me. You see buff guys coming out of the gym. There's no masculinity underneath. I've spent 5 years skimping. It's not worth it. Just needs to be balanced. Wanting women and self-respect both are normal. Twitter will let you back after a few years. My account was terminated, but Twitter let me come back after 4 years. Hang in there. Exciting, exciting. You live in the same house. What kind of shirt? Corn. Yeah, we love, well, actually, we don't love corn. It's in everything, corn syrup. So I say ban corn. I say Idaho, you're going to have to pick something new. You want to pick potatoes? Iowa, all you people, you're going to have to pick another crop because we're banning corn. It's banned. It's gone. You know, maybe we'll let the Native Americans have a special corn license. We can only have the colored corn. No more yellow corn. We're banning yellow corn. It's not allowed. I'm sorry. We're only having colored corn now. Decorative corn. That's the only kind of corn that's allowed. Mongolian throat singing works better than just shouting at people. Where, oh, we have to scroll up. I love the comment system. Conservatives are doomed. Thanks for the black pills. You know, you're ridiculous. Thanks for the black pills. Really? Thanks for the black pills? I am saving you from the black pills. If you believe in, what are you? You're saying, oh, well, I was hopeful, you know, before I believed that the conservative movement was going to save America, and I was white pilled, but then you criticized conservatives, and now I'm black pilled. What did you? So what are you saying? Like I should have let you believe that conservatism was going to save you, and then what was going to happen? You were just going to be white pilled into the grave. Like, what's the expectation? What are you saying when you say, okay, I'm telling you something doesn't work, and then you're like, thanks for the black pills. If I go up to you and I say, hey, don't buy a lottery ticket, you're wasting your money. Oh, thanks for the black pills. I thought I was going to win the lottery. Now you black pilled me. Thanks a lot. It's like, no, why don't you do something productive? You know, we could be creating beautiful artwork. We could be engaged in beautiful acts of love and power, and it has nothing to do with the conservative movement. So, you know, there's so many good things to do in the world. That's the message of hope. That's the message of positivity. They fooled you into believing that you have to put all your hopes and dreams in political ideologies. You don't have to do that. They've lied to you. You don't have to do that. There are so many good things you can do. There's so much, you know, and this is our orientation in the world. When I talked about the million-year view, the billion-year view, all these things, they come and they go. And what are we trying to do? We are trying to love. That's what we're trying to do. And it seems so simple, but you really have to break it down in your life. You have to ask, what is preventing you from doing a nightly live stream? But maybe that's not what you're for. Maybe what's preventing you from becoming a great artist? What's preventing you from loving the people around you? What's preventing you from finding people to love? What's preventing you about your self-image, your self-conception? What are all these things? And I'm not saying any of this is easy to do, but it is a great work. It is a great challenge. And for different people, it's going to be different. I don't think there's one, you know, slap, you know, the Staples button, you know, the big red button, you just slap the button and everything's solved. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. I can't just say, well, you all need to go to the gym. You know what? Maybe some people don't need to go to the gym. You all need to become a visual artist. And well, maybe that's not your talent. Or you all need to become a musician. Some people are tone deaf, right? There's no one project that I can give you that's going to be right for everybody. There's a lot of different things out there that are positive. We all need to figure out what's stopping us from doing those things. Obviously, we understand the outside world is trying to stop us from doing those things because they are trying to kill everybody. So toward their goal of killing everybody, they're trying to make everybody miserable. And if everyone's miserable, they're weak and they're easier to kill off. So we need to resist that. We recognize it. We resist it. We have to find ways. The positive way of fighting back isn't to yell at bureaucrats on the street or Mongolian throat sing at them. The positive way to fight back is to say, you know, I recognize the way in which I'm under attack. Okay, how do I insulate myself from that? But not just create a wall around me, but how do I embrace positive sources in order to create a strong, attractive nexus that's going to draw me away from okay, if the conservative movement doesn't succeed, I'm black-pilled and nothing matters anymore. That is such a superficial ideology. America is such a young country. Western civilization's only been around for a few thousand years. The Earth has only been around for a few billion years. Like, put things in perspective for a moment. When you say, oh, well, if the conservative movement doesn't blah, 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 we can't anything. Have you tried everything? I mean, this is the point, guys, this is the point where you have to break things down and really question the prison, the mental prison you've put in where someone can win an election and now you're blackpilled. You can't allow that. You can't, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't vote. I voted, people can vote. But you have to be able to act in this world in a way where you're not beholden to the consequences. You have to say, you have to kind of say, you know what, forget the consequences. I'm doing what's right, and what happens, happens. And you keep moving forward successively. You make decisions, and they, when you do the right thing, sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes, you see somebody drops their wallet on the street, and you pick it up to give it them, and say, hey, you dropped your wallet. And they could be a crazy person. They could start screaming at you, I'm going to call the police. You're trying to steal my wallet. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. I was trying to help you. You have to do the right thing. People are going to respond however they're going to respond. You have to do the right thing. The world at large is bigger than you. It's going to take you for a ride, and you got to kind of clench and hold on tight, and you still have to move forward. You can't, when you're on the roller coaster of life, you can't be throwing up and screaming and crying and being a disgusting mess. And that's what I hear when people say, oh, black-pilled again. It's like you're on the ride, and it is what it is, and you have to find a way to enjoy it. You have to find a source. Sometimes you have to find interesting things to say. Maybe you're singing a song to yourself. Maybe you're thinking some powerful mantras. Maybe you're doing some prayer. I don't know what you're doing. But you have to find those things. You have to investigate those things, because we know the world is changing, and we know it's not changing in a way that is attempting to make life easy and comfortable for you and better. In some ways, we've got DoorDash, and we've got, oh, I can order sushi and they'll deliver it to my door and I don't even have to leave the house. And people think that is convenience, and they think that is comfort. But it's not convenient to have a family, and it's not comfortable to have a relationship, and it's not easy to have a community. But it's easy and comfortable and convenient to, be naked in the house and get the DoorDash sushi at your door. So, it's easy and comfortable and convenient to, pop open the web browser and watch whatever you want to watch. That's comfortable, easy, and convenient. But that makes it very hard and difficult and rough to have a genuine emotional connection, or even to just have the energy to do something productive with your day. So this is the kind of quest that people have to take on. And when you simply view yourself as this kind of object in the ocean of life, and elections are happening and crisis is happening, and we're just sitting and wishing and hoping and praying that the Savior comes on from high and helps us. No, the Savior, he saves us not by changing the external apparitions of society. He saves us by changing our internal attitude, so that we're able to take on life in a way that we're able to find the opportunities for growth and positivity in a world where they're trying to put us in a mental prison. The moment you've said thanks for the black bills is the moment you're admitting that you're not even trying. If you're responding to a realistic picture of the world by saying thanks for the black bills, you're not trying. You're not on fire. You have to get on fire. You have to get energized. I don't know where you're going to find it. I can't force you to do that. I can tell you what to do. You're possibly not going to listen to me. So I can't force the change to happen. But it's something you're going to have to take on yourself. I don't have a Twitter, but the way people talk about it, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Yeah, I invested time, energy, and effort. The problem is I bookmarked thousands of tweets. I mean, just so many. And I had all this stored stuff and stuff for later, and it was a whole catalog. And I built that up on Twitter, and it's like I don't even want to post. If I never posted a single post on Twitter again, I'd be fine. I don't even really want to read Twitter. I just want my bookmarks, and they won't let me view them, which is the stupidest thing. They're private bookmarks. Only I could see them in the first place. And It's got all this, it's got funny, animal videos. It's got so much stuff. And I can't access it. Why can't I access it, Twitter? It's just punishment. They're just punishing me. I don't have any social media like Twitter. It makes you stupid. I'm already dumb as it is. Well, hey, maybe a good decision. Trump really fooled us all. Who's got his money. I can't believe I voted for him twice. I only voted for him once, and I voted him cynically. The first time I didn't vote for him, and I was very cynical about him. And the second time I voted with the full knowledge that it wasn't going to do any good, but I still voted. I said, we have to have an almost stoic attitude about voting. Because I think on some level there's going to come a time, hopefully, where people finally stop complaining about me blackpilling them, and they finally say, okay, well, if politics isn't the answer, maybe we actually have to love each other. Maybe we actually have to get off the internet and start forming real communities. And you've got people out there who are suicidal, and it's like, oh, I'm going to end it all, and I'm addicted to drugs, and everything's terrible. It's like, hey, you could move into a community. And they're like, no, that's crazy. I don't want to live with hillbillies. It's like, wait a second. You're saying your life literally couldn't get worse, and you're not willing to try something new. Really? And I'm not saying that a community full of suicidal crazy people is going to be the best idea either. But I'm just saying, you got to put things in perspective. And I think that voting on a local level probably it can be effective, getting involved in local politics, especially when you're talking about things like zoning. Like, can you park an RV on your property? Look, here's the thing. I understand people want to live in a nice neighborhood. I understand that. Nobody wants loud music at 3 a.m. I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to hear your fire alarm. I don't want to hear the loud music. I don't want to hear people screaming. I don't want to hear people beating each other up. I don't want to hear any of that. And so I understand why you have a HOA. I understand why they don't want the RV parked on the property. I understand all of that. But when you're trying to form a community and then you've got the city council and they're coming in, well, you can't have that, and that's not up to code, and that has to be in this style of architecture, and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's good to have a group of people who are used to the practice of voting. I mean, if you can have people who 90% of the time they're going out and voting, I mean, that's powerful, because still in the way that local governance works, it's not about having a majority of people, it's about having a majority of voters. And so being highly motivated, I just agree with the general practice. Like when you go to the gym and you lift weights look, if you go to the gym right now, today, you shut off the stream, you go to the gym, or you don't even go to the gym, you just start doing push-ups. If you do 10 push-ups right now, there's going to be an imperceptible change. You are not going to be any stronger at all. In fact, you're temporarily going to be weaker because you've just exhausted energy doing push-ups. But if you do that one day and you continue to do it and you're disciplined about it, and you're not saying, look, I'm only going to do push-ups if there's an immediate result. You're saying, no, it's a habit. I'm going to get in the habit of doing push-ups, and eventually, over a long enough time, I'm strong. That's how I view voting. I voted for Trump. I didn't vote for him because I thought he was going to change the world, it was going to make things better, or anything like that. I voted him because I said, we cannot allow cynicism to interrupt our discipline. We cannot allow a realistic and a reasonable understanding of politics to dissuade us from being involved in society. We still have to be involved. We still have to try. As much as we're not going to get an immediate return on our investment, we have to have that mentality. So that's what I was trying to develop with my vote. I wasn't trying to change things externally. I was trying to change things internally. We just have to wait for another set. I don't know what that means. Popular discourse is but an economy of sentiment. People channeling their hopes and angst into these channels, the political take manufacturers lay out for them. Because people's instinct is to attribute power to where the social energy is. They think because buzz is being generated around their favorite figures means the movement is going somewhere. Cripsis gang, your children will have all the spicy Cheetos they could ever want, even when they live in the pod. Support your local butcher. Then again, there's this whole genre of mukbang camera eating videos on YouTube where women eat pure cornstarch like they're starving. Ancestral memory, what's going on? Yeah, mukbang. I mean, I've done some. I'm drinking my carrot juice here. We're having a good, mmm, healthy. Look at this: 4 servings per container, 200% of my daily vitamin A. So if I drink this whole thing, that's 800%. That's 8 days of vitamin A. I've got 10% of my vitamin E. I don't even know what that does. We've got 10 of the C. We've got 10% of the B1. We've got 15% of the B6, 10% of the folate. So we've got all kinds of things going on with this one. It's even kosher. I mean, who would have guessed? They're thinking of everyone. Isn't that nice? Haitian dirt cookies. Revering the founding fathers is the American equivalent of Paul talking about Gentiles being grafted into the tree of Abraham. Anglo-American ideal historically was essentially that. Okay, that's a good analogy. Non-Anglo immigrants would take up the founders as spiritual ancestors. Yeah, that's a good take. Conservatives worship Ronald Reagan, even though he lost them California and ultimately America. Basically true. You socialize people into the in-group through a national cult of religion. True, the state is religious. We need a cult of the supreme being, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I'm just waiting for him to run for president. I mean, that's the obvious choice, isn't it? Even after Reagan gave illegals amnesty, California still voted for Prop 187, which banned undocumented immigrants from using state public services. A judge overturned that. Reagan was a kook. He was viewed as a kook in the sense that a lot of people said, oh, Reagan is crazy, he's going to start a war with the Soviet Union. But at the same time that he was saying all of that, he was just a Hollywood actor, right? So it was all just rhetoric. George H.W. Bush ran the show after the assassination attempt on Reagan. Yeah, George H.W. Bush, I believe, was also CIA director at one point. Let's see. I was talking about the collapse of the laws against obscenity in the 1950s. Could Christianity see a comeback if we find conclusive proof of irredeemable holes in Darwinian theory? I mean, that probably appeals to some people. It's never appealed to me. I believe that Darwinian evolution is compatible with Lamarckian evolution. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And I do believe in evolution. I do believe things change. And I think Christianity says that things change. I mean, the fact that you had Judaism and then you have Christianity, that's spiritual evolution, right? So the idea that there's not a biological correlation, I think, is I don't think that's like when people say, in the beginning, God created everything perfect and there was no change at all. It's like, well, then what do you call the coming of Christ? That sounds like a pretty big change to me. So I don't get when these people, I mean, obviously, the theory of evolution was not really developed and popular for a while. And so in the same way, I mean, this is like people who talk about flat Earth because they think somehow it's connected with Christianity and they think the moon landings were fake. And look, I believe the mainstream people want to have theories, and more of those theories are being censored, and I just don't think they're important to me. I think, like I said, a lot of Christians out there will say, like, look, my religious journey was I was an atheist, and then I started reading Latin, and I started reading the Aeneid, and I started learning about the Greeks, and I was like, this is very cool. And I was like, wait a second, religion is okay now, and we can investigate things like Christianity. So to me, it was an investigation, a fascination with polytheism and state religion that then led me to say, okay, well, maybe Christianity isn't evil. So to me, I view those things as complementary, compatible. That was my own idiosyncratic journey. So, when people say things like, well, we can't believe in evolution, it's like, I hear what you're saying. I hear there's something very appealing to just being a fundamentalist and so on and so forth. It's a very safe feeling. It's like I reject everything. I'm a fundamentalist. I have my airtight theology. I don't accept anything out of that. And I see why it's appealing to people, but it's just not where my mind is at. The Greeks and Romans did not have Christian sexual morality. I mean, they were not Christian. correct. There was a time when Greeks and Romans were not Christian. But there's a huge amount of overlap between Christian sexual morality and what we consider pagan sexual morality. Yes, there were differences. But what are you implying? That we should bring back pederasty? That we should bring back war, rape? What are you implying? I mean, because that's what you're implying one of two things. You're either saying we should be sexual libertines because you can have a great civilization with sexual libertinism, which is not true. Or you're saying we should bring back pederasty and war rape. When you're pointing at it, you're saying, oh, Christianity is stupid. The Greeks and Romans did fine without Christian sexual morality. Well, what's your problem with Christian sexual morality? Is it the fact that women aren't allowed to just be sleeping around with whatever? Well, the Greeks and Romans didn't believe in that. Is it the pederasty and war rape? Well, is that your contention? What's your point here? Because you're just attacking Christianity. You're saying, well, we were great before Christianity came along and ruined everything. What does that have to? It doesn't follow. You're not making a coherent point. It took centuries for Christianity to gain enough elite support to displace the old Roman religion. Are we looking at a similar time frame now regarding a new healthy narrative taking over? Probably. Not to mention the fact that Rome was deep into its decline by the time it adopted Christianity. Not entirely true. I mean, okay, so when we look at the vertex of Roman history, it was ascendant for many centuries. Julius Caesar comes around, and they convert from a republic into an empire through Augustus and these emperors, and then eventually they start to decline and degenerate. But really, Christianity was born at the height of the Roman Empire, and then as it started to degenerate, the Romans were feeling kind of nihilistic about everything, and in that nihilism, a lot of them became Christian fanatics. Let's see, could be a while. Christianity could see a return the more we learn about the hard problem of consciousness being primary, the material world being secondary to consciousness. Yeah, good luck, I mean, wow. I mean, because the way that Christianity spread was not by talking about the hard problem of consciousness. That's not really how it originated. The story of Christ is no longer compelling to people. I think it is. I think the story of Christ is compelling, but I think that oftentimes Christ is now replaced with Martin Luther King. Christ is replaced with George Floyd. So I think the story is compelling. I think that he has been essentially defamed. I think Christ has been dragged through the mud. He's presented, there's so many negative narratives. They'll tell you, well, he was a long-haired hippie. And it's like, oh, well, I don't like long-haired hippies, so I guess I don't like Jesus. And then other people will say, oh, well, he was a fascist, he was a sexist, he was homophobic. They're like, oh, well, I don't like that, so I guess I don't like Jesus. So everyone is told a narrative about Jesus that makes them have an emotion. I mean, we've been conditioned emotionally to not like Jesus. I mean, that's just the truth. But no matter how much we don't like the name Jesus, we still like the story. It's everywhere. It's in Hollywood. It's in all these social movements. We love the story of Jesus. But the name of Jesus, we don't like that because we've been conditioned to hate that. We've been conditioned to either think it's evil if you're on the left wing or lame if you're on the right wing. No la. I thought all of Europe had gendered language except England and it's English. Yeah, that's probably true. English is pretty unique because we speak a Creole language that's between Anglo-Saxon and the Norman. So it's we had to eliminate a lot of our grammar in order for people to understand each other. Also, the Anglo-Saxon and the Norse, the Creole there. Not to mention the Celts and the Romans, but the better way I could have said that would be say that Buckley at the time represented a shift. You can say that he was a representative of a shift in politics. Are you a deist or an agnostic? Oh boy, you want to put a label on me now. Well, I mean, I reject the term agnostic because that's just another way of saying you're an atheist. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, that just means you don't have faith. The important thing about your relationship with God is not like a scientific philosophical explanation. God is not important because it's like, oh, now I understand the mechanism of being. Now I understand the mechanism of creation. That's not the important part. And I'm not saying there isn't like a truth or falsehood to, mechanisms of creation or cosmology, but that's not like truth has meaning insofar that it's applicable. Like if I tell you right now that 537 minus 5 is 532, that's true. We agree that's true. But is that useful? Like, are we willing to fight a war over that? Like, now obviously there are implications within the mechanism of subtraction that are related to other logical operations that we're dependent upon, right? So if we deny that truth in an absolute form, we're also subsequently denying implicit statements that relate to other mathematical principles that our society relies on. So in a sense, yes, it is important, but you understand that when we talk about mathematical operations, the truth or falsehood of a particular mathematical solution to a particular mathematical problem is not in itself important. It's only important in the general principles. You hear what I'm saying? So when we talk about God and people say, well, I believe in God, I don't believe in God. Your belief in God is totally irrelevant to your behavior unless you have faith. Belief really means nothing without faith. If you're like, yeah, I think there's like a God out there and probably this and that, but if you're not in love with God, if you don't view, I think God only has meaning insofar that there is love involved. There's a relationship where you look at God, and we can look. And this is how I came into religion, as I started looking at history and politics in the way that we love George Washington. We love the Founding Fathers. We love great heroes. We love Siegfried. You just hear about a man slaying a dragon. It's like, I love that man. And so that love, it is such a fundamental force of human nature. The love that we have for heroism, the love that we have for divinity, the love that we have for this ascendance, and all of the particularities therein, but the love is more important. It's more important that we love God than it's like, do you believe? Are you agnostic or are you deist? That doesn't matter. If someone tells me they're an atheist, but they say, I love truth, and I love my country, and I love my people, and I love it, but I'm an atheist, and I'm agnostic, or I'm deist, I'm like, you're more religious than somebody who says, well, I was raised a Christian, or, well, I guess I believe in God. How would all this stuff get here without God? Atheism just doesn't make sense. I don't care about any of that. I care about, do you have love? Do you have a relationship with divinity where you have love in the way that you conceptualize that? Different people have different conceptions, but it's important to me that people have love and passion, because otherwise you get these people who are like, I'm black-pilled. It's like, you probably don't have a relationship with God. You probably don't have a relationship with divinity. If I'm pointing out obvious flaws, if I'm telling you that Trump is a feminist and he's promoted Richard Grenell and Ivanka has promoted feminism and he's done more and he's doubled the LGBTQ Republican vote, and I point out those facts, and you're like, oh, you black-pilled me, and you're just a terrible bully, and you don't have a relationship with God. You're not in a passionate, loving, relationship with the divine. That's what's important. That's what I'm seeking. Am I there? Am I at my full power level? Have we maxed out? Have we reached our full potential? No, we've never reached our full potential. So I'm never going to be there. I'm never going to be perfectly in that, that's kind of what Jesus is supposed to be. He's supposed to be the total unification of man with God. That's where we want to be. Where we are is we're in a state of separation, but we want to get closer. We want to close that gap. So it's a working process. It's not like, I don't say like, I am this label and this certifies me, because I'm not in a church community. I tried to go to a church community. Frankly, the people there were lame and they had colored hair and whatever. And that's supposed to be the conservative one. And that's supposed to be the one where they believe in conspiracy theories. That's supposed to be the one that's like radical and, is all kind of, oh, we don't accept the mainstream narrative and whatever. And they're supposed to be the outlier. And the other church has a big neon sign that says racism is a sin, and if you're racist, you're going to burn in hell. So I'm like, it's either this church or that church. And I'm supposed to be going to the cool church, but it's kind of lame. It's not it doesn't ignite my passion for God. I want to listen. I want to go to a church where they're playing Dies Irae. I want to have a church where they're unifying paganism and monotheism. I want to go to a church where the art is beautiful. I want to go to a church where they're playing epic video game music. I want to have a church where we're meditating for 5 hours. I want to have a crazy church. That's the kind of church I want. And it's hard to find. You know, you try to go to some of these places and they're like, let's have Zoom church. I'm like, why don't you have a pleasant day? Why don't you have a nice day? Let's just drink some carrot juice. Yep. We're neutral. We're back to neutral. Don't think digging up historical figures is a good direction to go. Yeah, you're probably right about, resurrecting paganism. That's probably not productive. But that was just I have my own idiosyncratic things. Not that makes sense. Maybe if I wasn't on the internet, maybe I wouldn't be talking about silly things like that. But here we are. Not that all the changes in the right wing originated. George Washington is the American god of honesty and leadership. Yeah, you also have Abraham Lincoln as well. In this, Abraham Lincoln, very similar to Julius Caesar. Southerners don't like to hear that, but Abraham Lincoln came. He was also kind of like Sulla in a way, saving the republic. He came. There was a lot of violence. He's kind of a deity. He's kind of the god of honesty. Honest Abe. People don't like it, but he turned America from a republic to an empire, and people don't like that. But he's very similar to Julius Caesar. Maybe not as handsome as Julius Caesar, but he's this war leader, a giant. He was like 6'7" or something. Absolute giant. Had like 14 kids. Half of them died in childbirth or whatever. I mean, you have to look at some of these elites. Some of these guys are pretty strong, They're not pushovers. Modern left is different from the Bolsheviks. Where do you come up with this stuff? The Bolsheviks were organizing illegal paramilitaries and assassinating politicians. That is a good point. Yeah, the Bolsheviks were pretty hardcore. I mean, when we talk about the billionaire left, that's the term I use, the billionaire left, the people who call themselves left-wing, who are fueled and funded by billionaires. These people are bureaucrats. They're DMV workers. People who are the Bolsheviks, I mean, you look at Trotsky, you look at Stalin, you look at Lenin, and they were made of tough stuff. I mean, the Bolsheviks were made of tough stuff. The bureaucrats and the DMV workers, they have power because we have a class orientation that's merchant-dominated. So that's why they have power, because we worship money. But if we had a different class orientation, these people would be left in the dust. It's all about the class structure. The only prominent left figure in the U.S. who is an immigrant realist is Tulsi Gabbard. I don't even know that she's really against immigration all that much. I know a lot of people like Tulsi. And, I mean, she has a likable personality, in a sense. I don't think she's actually very good at being a politician. She has a Hawaiian accent, so it works in Hawaii. It doesn't really work as a national presidential figure. All right, I got to scroll up. Give me a second. Okay, Christianity, Bolshevism, iconoclasm, Byzantine iconoclasm movement toward ascetic purity within the already dominant religious framework. I get the mole removed. My man, we are all about radical love. Yeah, that's true. We're put on this earth to amass likes. Get out of here, Ziv. I don't want to hear your twisting of my words. What's preventing me from making silly comments in nightly live streams? Oh boy, it could be contentious. I don't know. You'd really mess me up, man. Red devil lighting. I don't know if I can trust you. Very scary. 1,000-year plan, Sargon style. Oh man. Oh boy, we got a lot of comments. We've got my only positivity is my incessant effort to ban. Yeah, because this is lame. This is lame. I'm not even circumcised, and this is lame. This is the least of our problems. Maybe if I was circumcised, I would feel, but that's not even true. There are plenty of people who are circumcised who are not obsessed with circumcision. It's not even the worst thing in the world. I'm not even a practicer of it. It's not even the worst thing in the world. You know what? People were circumcised and it was fine, and I don't endorse it or whatever, but you have a weird sexual fetish, man. You're a weird guy. You're a weird guy. I think you need help. I think you need to stop being obsessed with circumcision, and you need to, like, maybe focus on some things you're ignoring in your life. If you're focused on circumcision, maybe you need to create some art, some music, go to the gym. I don't know which one you need to do, but it's probably not posting about circumcision. And that is sad. When you say the only positivity in my life is my posting about circumcision, and you're everywhere, and you're on everyone's niche little weird videos, and it's just so many layers of wrong. It's just so bad. It's so wrong, and it's so bad. It's like, I wish I could help. But you can't force people to change. You can't tell somebody who's been posting about circumcision for years on end in every single video, you can't tell them to change and hope that they're going to change. They can only do that themselves. But it's not so. I'm never going to be okay with that. Brown-pilled again. Yep, we've been brown-pilled again. I'm scheming. I'm doing serious scheming. Oh, Randy's up to his schemes again. Have you read Oswald Spengler's Man and Technics or Decline of the West? No, it's like 1,000 pages, dude. You think I'm going to read that? No. I will read the Wikipedia entry. I'm not going to read Oswald Spengler. I'll watch like a John David Ebert video about it, and then I'll be good to go. Okay, I'm not going to read 1,000 pages, translated from the German from 1911 or whenever he wrote that thing. And it's not even all correct. Like, he gets things wrong. Why would I fetishize this ancient text? It's not ancient, but you know. Why would he's this dead white man. Why am I going to fetishize this thing when we can read the summary, we get the big picture, we give him credit where credit's due, we criticize him where he got things wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things to read in the world. Why don't we read some religious texts? Let's read some religious texts. Let's read self-help books. Let's read Think Rich and Grow Quick. I don't know what I haven't read that one. What did I read? It was like how to get friends and read people, how to get rich and have friends. I forget. It's one of those classics. I kind of blitzed through the last couple 50 pages. It's like 150. It's a short book. How to win friends and influence people. I think that was it's all bumbled together, right? But that would probably be more useful. Reading things, there's a couple of ways. There's 3 types of things that you could. There's probably more. You can read things in a religious sense. I view, like, The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and most fantasy, I view it as a religious text. I'm not saying it's a good religion, but it's essentially a religious text. It's a moralizing text. And then there's technical knowledge. You're reading a math book. You're reading physics. You're reading technical things that you need to get a degree to make money. That's another reason to read. And then you've got like tweets, which are kind of little religious bites. I guess everything fits into those 2 categories, but I was thinking, like, when you read Oswald Spengler, it's like you're reading him because you're fetishizing him to a religious degree. You're not reading him for the knowledge. If you want the knowledge, read the Wikipedia summary, watch the John David Ebert. Don't actually sit down and read the book. Like, unless you're going to be a Spengler scholar and your whole life revolves around him and you're the Spengler guy and it's your career, reading Spengler, really, that's a religious practice. And Spengler's not, I don't think following Spengler as a religious practice is a good idea. I think he did some things and we can learn from those things, but we don't have to. He's not part of my pantheon. He is not part of my founding fathers. Joke's on you. I'm working out as I watch this stream. Well, that's good. American empire will collapse soon. This is all moot. Well, yeah, if 200 years is soon, then sure. Voting Trump after like half a year of Biden wave video outros. Well, it's funny, when I did those, I thought it was pertinent to the time, and also it was in the context of Bloomberg and that whole contention and the Sanders and everything that was going on. So I put that out there, and then people took that as a Biden endorsement. And that was fine. I was like, well, fine. People believe I'm a Biden supporter. Maybe I won't get my channel banned. Maybe I am a Biden supporter at that point. If I can keep my, sure, we'll be voting Biden until 2028. 2 terms for Biden. He'll be 89. I don't know how old he's going to be, but 2 terms for him. Vox Day maintains that the U.S. will collapse and balkanize before 2033. Do you think he's right? No, I think he is idiotic. I think he probably is good at like doing computer programming or artwork or whatever he does as a political commentator. Totally irrelevant. Why people still talk about a guy who maybe wrote a book, I think he wrote SJWs Never Lie, and he was like semi-popular at one point. How people still follow that guy, I don't understand. That is ridiculous. The U.S. is not going to collapse. You just have all these people, when they say the United States is going to collapse, with respect to what? With respect to what? What's your theory of history, bud? Oh, well, the British Empire rose and fell. Look at the French. Look at the Germans. Look at the Russians. Look at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed. Look at the Romans. Look at the Greeks. Okay, if we actually break down any of these examples, it makes no sense whatsoever to say the country will collapse by 2033. That makes no sense. Look at the British. The British never collapsed. Yes, they lost their colonies, but they're still an economic power. And they basically merged with the Americans. So it's a lot more complex. You can say, oh, the British collapsed. It's actually more complex than that. It was a merger of 2 countries and intelligence agencies. The whole thing was planned, by the way. The British did not lose a single battle. It's not as if whoever these people are, or who did they colonize? The Sudanese? It's not as if the Sudanese had a revolution. It's not as if the Egyptians beat the British military. It was all agreed upon. It was part of a UN plan to decolonize so that we can do neo-colonialism instead of the old colonialism. That was the plan. That was the plot. And leftists understand this. Right-wingers don't seem to understand this. At the same time, they think somehow the Soviet Union collapsed. I hear people claiming this, oh, the Soviet Union, just one day it collapsed. And no one could have predicted that. Actually, Anatoly Chubais was starting free market organizations in the Soviet Union, and they had perestroika, and they had all this anti-Stalinist rhetoric. It was a long time coming. The CIA did it. The FBI did it. It was a controlled demolition. It was part of this 2-pronged approach. Frankly, the communists were always in league with New York City, and it continued to be that way, and it was Coke versus Pepsi. So when people say the Soviet Union collapsed, dude, Putin was a KGB agent. How did the Soviet Union collapse? It was a geopolitical reorientation. They had an FBI dude who was prime minister, and he was selling everything off, and they had insider trading. They were doing the loans to the oligarchs. They said the Soviet Union will make loans. They're going to take out loans from oligarchs and then not be able to pay them off, and then as collateral will give state-owned corporations to oligarchs. It was a totally designed scheme. It wasn't like the people revolted one day and the Soviet Union was too weak. No, in East Germany, the chancellor, whoever, I forget what the term they have, but anyway, the leader of East Germany, he says, I'm going to put tanks in the streets, just like we did in 1956 with the Hungarians. We are going to crush these people. We're going to slaughter them in the streets, get them out of the streets, and reimpose order. They were ready to do it, and Moscow said no. Why? Because Moscow was controlled by capitalists, because you had all these people who were alcoholics and basically the Russian equivalent of Churchill, and they're in there, and they're totally controlled by America. It was an intelligence war. Who is going to do that to us? What's China's going to do that? They're going to buy out they're going to collapse our economy? China's dependent on our economy. They're dependent on the trade networks that we provide because of our military. China can't survive without that. The idea that they're going to take us out, we don't have that same relationship with them. Now, if something significant changes, but you look at Biden's relationship with China, China has no interest in collapsing the United States. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous proposition. If it happens, it's not good. When people say the Soviet Union collapsed, what collapsed? You had a recession, and now a KGB agent's in charge of the country. The country's a little bit smaller. It's essentially the same country. That's your collapse? So what are we going to lose California? Are you going to call that a collapse? That's not a collapse. When you say collapse, we're talking about barbarian invasions. We're talking about Black Death levels of plague. We're talking about extreme. That's what collapse means. So people put out this term collapse and then they say, oh, we got to stock up on ammo and food and canned food. No, we're not going to have a collapse. Maybe China buys California. I don't know. I mean, things like of that nature are possible, that we have a kind of incremental. Basically, what happened with this desovietization is Russia still exists. Georgia split off, Ukraine split off, the Baltics, Belarus. Belarus is still basically part of Russia for the most part. But there was some split off of these splinter states. That might happen with America, but honestly, it's not going to happen with the 50 states. It's going to happen with, Canada is going to be taken over by the Chinese, which is an unofficial protectorate of America. Or you're going to see withdrawals of NATO. Before you ever see a quote-unquote collapse of America, you're going to see our external foreign bases, we're going to start to withdraw troops. And the fact that we hold the globe together, and we've been doing this, we took over the British Empire. Britain didn't collapse, we took over Britain. We invaded Britain during World War II. That's what happened. It was an ingredient. We didn't kill the British people, but that's what happened. We took over Britain. We took over the British Empire. We basically took over the trade routes. We took over the responsibility of maintaining the global economy. That's what America does. The Soviet Union didn't provide that function, so it could be dissolved in a certain sense without disrupting the global economy. You can't do that with America. The petrodollar, the American military holds everything together. You can't disrupt American primacy without also hurting the good thing that China has going on. We're interdependent, so China doesn't have the incentive to take us out in that way. They might want to change certain political alignments. They might want to take over a basketball team, buy up land, whatever. We might see more Chinese billionaires. We might see Andrew Yang become president. That's not going to be a collapse. That's going to be a Chinese takeover or increasing Chinese influence. But it's not going to be a collapse because China doesn't want America to collapse in the way that America wanted the Soviet Union to collapse. That was a long time coming because the problem is the Soviet military class was too strong and they were not on board with neoliberalism, and they actually banned gay marriage. So there were things about Russia. In fact, if anything's going to happen, China's going to collapse. People think, oh, America's so weak. No, China could collapse tomorrow. If we put sanctions on China, the Chinese economy would be destroyed. They would have a huge civil war like you've never seen before. They've done it before. The War of the Heavenly Kingdom, 19th century, more deaths than even perhaps World War II. Like 50 million people die. You could have that happen again in the 21st century. You don't know how fragile the Chinese are. They're so strong. Oh, they've got 1 billion people in their arm. Oh, they're so strong. Look, they're doing choreographed dancing. No, you see all that. I mean, it's basically a fascist state. And how long did fascism last? Not very long. They can take it out. They could take it out. It's a very centralized. Any centralized system is fragile. They could take it out. America is more resilient. America is more anti-fragile. America is multinational. So the idea we're going to collapse, what does that mean? There's many different interpretations. Some people would say that if the EU takes over our country, if the UN takes over, if we ban the American flag and replace it with the rainbow flag, that would be a collapse. That's not what I think about. And you're using confusing language and you're selling a message it's scandalous. It's like, oh, we're going to collapse in just a couple of years. Oh, so it's very exciting. I mean, it would be the same thing as if I, showed you my breasts. Like, okay, you can do that and that's exciting, but it's just not, it's not right and proper. I don't like it. I don't like people when they talk about, the United States could collapse. No, here's what's going to happen. You're going to lose all your wealth and you're going to be a slave. The United States will be fine. The United States will survive, but you're going to be a slave. So that's why you need to buy land. That's why you need to join a religion. That's why you need to be part of a community. So there's a collapse coming, but it's a class-based collapse. It is the collapse of the middle class. It's not the collapse of the United States. All these conservatives and right-wingers are trying to draw you into this idea that the United States is going to collapse. We have to fight against China with Steve Bannon and we have to look at Hunter Biden. No. That's ridiculous. That's a distraction from the fact that they're destroying the middle class. And you need to hop aboard a lifeboat, which is going to be religion, community, buying land. real assets, hard assets. It's not looking like you have to fight against China on the internet. Or, oh, we're going to, and that word balkanize. I mean, there's just so much BS loaded in this comment from Vox Day. Balkanize. We're not going to balkanize. The only balkanization that's possible is you say, okay, well, California goes to Mexico, and maybe Alabama becomes the black ethno state. But that's not really even possible. You look at the states where the blacks are a slight majority or near a majority, and it's a slim majority. None of these states, none of them are even 60% black or even 70. So that's not possible. Balkanization is where you have Greece and you have Albania and you have Serbia and you have Montenegro and Kosovo and you have Romania and you have Hungary and you have all these different Baltic nations that are geographically distributed in a way that you can carve up states that makes sense, right? And you can even do population redistributions that Greece and Turkey did. But the point is that there were nations that were geographically centered within places that you could draw borders, and they would be rough, and there were wars. There were Balkan wars. We know that there were wars, but they were balkanizable. What we have is Viennization. You look at the city of Vienna, and it's got all these different people. That's what America has. All these different people, all these places, there's no clear majority. You've got like a slim white majority. It's not clear. You're not going to see balkanization. People talk about political balkanization. That's the cities versus the rural. That's not balkanization. It's not like you had the Serbians living in the cities and then the Albanians living in the countryside. Although in some cases you look at Ukraine and Poland, and there is that area where Lvov or Lviv is, and you've got actually, I forget which one is which. I think the Poles live in the cities and the Ukrainians live in the countryside, but it could be reversed. In any case, there are historical examples like that, but we have that en masse in America where all the liberals live in the cities, the conservatives live in the countryside. That's not a balkanization situation. When you use the term balkanization, you don't actually understand what the Baltics, you've never looked at a map of the Balkans. I keep saying Baltics. I'm sorry, the K and the T, they're switching up on me. But the Balkans, you've never looked at a map. You look at an ethno-linguistic map of the Balkans in the 19th century and you can see the nations. You do that for America, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We're not going to have balkanization. It makes no sense. We have Viennization. Very different process, much more complicated. It's not going to be solved with a collapse. It's going to lead to an Austro-Hungarian Empire. We're going to see the rise of essentially a dual monarchy or more in America, which we already have, but it's within a democratic, mercantile framework rather than an aristocratic, monarchistic framework. So it's going to manifest differently, but we're going to have a multicultural empire. People don't accept that that can exist, but Rome had a multicultural empire for hundreds of years. Yeah, it was declining or whatever, but it's not going to collapse. I'm starting Vince Gooey Ronda's raw egg cycle. I've thought about the raw eggs, but I'm just not convinced that that's the way to go. I think I would be more nauseous. I get nauseous lately. I'm a little bit nauseous. I think carrot juice is good for nausea, but I think the raw eggs, they make you nauseous. I don't know if it's worth it for me. I don't know if I'm on that level. I mean, some people can do it, and I'm not against the raw eggs, but I don't know. I'm just not quite there yet. There's some other things we gotta get on a consistent. I've never been on a consistent gym schedule. To really get on a consistent schedule, and then maybe once you're there, maybe then you add in some raw eggs. But I don't know. I feel like there's levels. I feel like creatine comes before raw eggs. Some people would say differently, but I feel like there's levels in your fitness journey. I feel like creatine is less extreme than the raw eggs. Because you can get salmonella. I mean, is that real? Is salmonella real? Or is that just for the weak? I don't know. Maybe I'm weak. Maybe I can't handle the raw eggs. I actually have tried the Japanese. I always trust Japanese people. When Japanese people say, here, we didn't cook this food, eat it. I'm like, okay, whatever you say, Japanese man. Like, you want to give me raw steak, raw sushi, raw eggs? I don't care. I'll eat it. But anyone else, you tell me McDonald's worker, you tell me it's not cooked, I'm not eating that. I only trust the Japanese with raw. I mean, so if you get a Japanese person to DoorDash me raw eggs, I might try that. But otherwise, buying them from the store and just eating them, that sounds scary. Supposed to emulate the effect of steroids. I've heard of that, but I mean, I could just eat onions and garlic. How about that? Told you to grab some Bitcoin. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm gonna buy high, sell low. Yeah, that's the best idea. You're asking if I'm the same guy who was linked to you in 2018. Well, you know, people do post links. I've never posted a link to my channel everywhere, just for the just for the record. I know people always say it's so easy to confuse it. I mean, who even cares, right? Anyone could just go, oh, why you are secretly spamming your links to your channel. Man, I could be doing interviews with people. I could be reaching out to people. I make my audience do the work. I say, as far as I'm concerned, if I get 2 views on a video, it is what it is. And if the audience wants the channel, you know, really, the channel would have never grown if it wasn't for the audience demanding that I grow. They're like, you're lazy. You need to grow the channel. I was like, fine, help me grow the channel. Then we'll do it. You want to complain about the channel being small? Fine, go spread the channel. But, you know, if the audience never said that, if they were just happy to sort of keep the content to themselves and be like, it'll just be a secret channel. If that's what was going on, then, you know, we would just do that. But instead we're growing the channel. Let's see, where are we at with the likes? We're at 35 likes, 42 viewers. We can get more than 35 likes. Come on, what are you doing? Don't you want another stream? I mean, we only need 70 likes, so I mean, it seems simple. You're watching the video. If you're watching it, you probably like it. So then you hit the like button, and then you get another one. You don't hit the like button, and then you have to wait. And that's, I mean, it's up to you. It seems as though you are the same guy. How did I end up here once again? It's mystical. It's magical. He's back. Okay, we got to scroll up again. I've been conditioned to hate Hollywood and love Jesus. Well, that's powerful countercultural conditioning there. We need to have a love appreciation of our experiences and of and as. So you're saying our experience of God's creations and as God's creations. Yep. I only eat organic grass-fed beef, organic eggs, organic dairy, organic Japanese sweet potato, and organic carrots. That's a very strict diet. Occasionally, I'll have a grapefruit. Whoa. Whoa, wild, man. You're very wild. Go to an SSPX church, checks all your boxes. Well, I actually am in extreme pain when I sit down, so driving is a problem because I have a degenerative genetics. Why is attempting paganism silly? It's hard. You can't go backwards with these things. That's not how it works, so... I mean, I've been quite silly talking about paganism, but it's just I'm in a silly mood, I suppose. 90% of circumcised women in East Africa love their females. Why are you still talking about it? You're wrong about circumcision. It's a really big deal. Yeah, I'm sure it is to you. That doesn't make me wrong. I mean, you just think it's a big deal because your priorities are wrong. It's hard to deny that mutilation is the single biggest human rights violation. You are so stupid. The single biggest human right. People can't love each other. People can't have friends. People can't listen to decent music. I mean, there's so many. You want to talk about rights violations? I can't go outside without a shirt. I can't, you know, I'm not free to start a family. I can't get married. It's illegal to get married. That would be called slavery because till death do its part. Well, no, woman needs to have a right to divorce and take half your income and the kids and the alimony. So I don't have a right to get married. That's a human rights violation. As far as the circumcision goes, that is so small. And I'm not saying I endorse it. I'm not saying that, you know, you have to just, but you're kind of convincing me to like circumcision. The more you hyper-focus on stupid things, the more I want to endorse those stupid things just to make you mad, because it's so stupid when you say, oh, there's all these terrible things going on, but the biggest thing is the fact that we're cutting off some skin. I mean, have you ever had an ear piercing? Have you ever seen someone with a tattoo? It's not that I do that, but I'm just saying, you know what? A little snipping, a little bit of whatever, Is it the biggest deal that when we have so much emotional trauma, people are being abused, people are being depressed, people are being driven into terrible, basically hell on earth, and you're talking about something that is relatively superficial? It's disgusting. You're disgusting me. Having an intact foreskin is not a human. Okay, so here's somebody who is counteracting. This is now a pro-circumcision stream. This is now the title's quite long, maybe we can change it later. But this is now a pro-circumcision stream. I will forcibly, if you're an adult and you're not circumcised, I'm going to vote for a politician to pass a law for the police to come to your house and just castrate you. Not that I'm going to do it, not that I'm not a violent person. I just think that for health, sanitary reasons, we've got to, anyone who, it's kind of like the anti-vaxxers. Like if you are an anti-vaxxer, the police are going to come to your house, they're going to pin you down, they're going to force you to take it, they're going to put you in solitary confinement. I think at this point, when you tell me, oh, all the things that's going on in our culture, religion, everything that's going on, oh, that's going on, but the single biggest thing, if I could change one thing about this country, no, I wouldn't change the religion, I wouldn't change the culture, I wouldn't change the music or the art or the architecture, or the political system or the politicians or the class system or the distribution of money in our society. I wouldn't change diseases, and I wouldn't change alcoholism and drug abuse, and I wouldn't change the marital system, and I wouldn't change the legal system. I would change this little itty-bitty circumcision. Well, you know what? Maybe the police are going to come to your house, and they're going to pin you down, and they're going to castrate you. So if you keep it up, if you keep talking about it, I don't want it to happen, but look, it is what it is. I believe Lord of the Rings is a historical fact. Yeah, that's a funny take. Funny thing is, I wrote a 34,000 word manifesto on the topic. I wrote it with Gregory. I haven't really thought or talked about it a lot. I realize nobody cares. Well, you know what? Hey, man. You realize that it doesn't matter, and you talk more about it. You say, I personally care, but I realize nobody cares about it. One aspect that inspired me to write it was that circumcision has been taken out of a sacred tradition. It's been secularized and medicalized. It's not medically or scientifically valid. The only justification I see is tribal or religious. Without communal bond, it's nothing. So, what you're saying here is you were obsessed enough with the topic to write a manifesto. You then realized nobody cares, and you're not, you've gotten over it. It is what it is. The thing happened, and it's over. And you're trying to move on with your life, and I can respect that. I've read all kinds of, I've read 1,000-page books before. I'm not going to tell you what they were, but I've read long books, and then after the fact, I was like, wow, I know a lot of things now that I can't even talk about, nobody even cares about, and I'm going to move on with my life. So I think that is more respectable than when it's the sunk cost fallacy. You make your whole life about circumcision, and then you have to force it on me, and I don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm sick. It would be one thing if you said, by the way, circumcision. It's another thing to say it's the single most important human right violation. You're a parody. You're a ridiculous person. You are not a serious person. I maintain that you will collapse and balkanize before 2033. Well, that's possible. My arm here, definitely looking like a different nation from this arm. I think they're going to balkanize. Or I could bulkanize. I could be 300 pounds. I could be all bulked up. I could be jacked and juiced. I could be sumo mode. I could be balkanized. And then I could collapse of a heart attack, So that could definitely happen. The center of Western civilization shifts from place to place. Very good point. People are cutting off, and they're amputating, infecting them, and killing them, infecting them, and causing them to rot. Nobody cares. Bro, that's like 1% of 1%. That's not... I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but this is like, you're like the person who's like, black on white crime, black on white crime, black on white crime. I'm like, it's 533, bro. It's 533. In a perfect world, it wouldn't exist. It's not the biggest issue. You're just a fetishist. You're trying to force your sexual fetish on everybody, and it's gross. you're being gross. We already banned female circumcision. We need to ban male circumcision. The likelihood is nearly zero. Yeah, so it's not an important... You want to start fights with people over circumcision. It's not something worth it. You don't love God. If you're fighting about circumcision, you don't love God. You don't know what's important. You're not a healthy person. You're sick. You're sick and you're twisted. You are fetishizing as much as people like they fetishize foot fetishes and they fetishize, what do they do? They be a pay pig and they're paying the girl on OnlyFans. People fetishize that. You're fetishizing. If you're still talking about circumcision, you're calling it the worst civil rights, human rights violation, and they're amputating, they're cutting, and people are getting herpes. You're talking about 1%. You're talking about a small percentage. You're the same thing as the people talking about black on white crime. It's a distraction. You're sick. You're on the internet. You're jumping onto my live stream. You're spreading your sickness. You need to stop pushing your sickness. You need to go somewhere else with your sickness. It's gross. You're grossing me out. I'm going to get nauseous. I need to drink some carrot juice. I don't know who fars in. I'm going to war with these anti-circumcision people. They're getting we're getting violent here with the circumcision people. You know, it's getting serious. The question I always ask is when people bring up it's a religious ritual, could Tesla and his batteries collapse the petrodollar? Probably not. I'm not a big Tesla follower. I don't know. That's an unknown. I don't know about that. China is a fascist state, so is America, in different ways. You know, it's all corporatism. Why are you obsessed? Why is this these foreskin people, they take over the live chat. We got to get out of here. Vox Day is a very weird man, full of hubris, and the music he made was terrible. I've never listened to his music. I thought he made video games or something, or comic books. I don't know. I've never listened to the music. I think he is weird. And he's one of these people, I think I've seen part of a live stream where he has like a sword in the background and he lives in Italy and he's got his book. Anyone who does a video and they've got the bookcase in the back and they've got like the roaring fireplace, I mean, it's funny as a parody, but at some point it gets boring. Sufficient secessionism would eventually be viewed as collapsed by later generations. I'm skeptical that will happen. I think the U.S. will hold itself together. Yeah, that's, we can go to war over circumcision, but we can agree there. I think there are better 90s music groups that better capture the essence of that period. There are electronic dance that are better. Yeah, I don't know. Scrolling. There's a lot of message retracted. Where are we at here? Parents are from Ukraine. I know about Eastern Europe and Balkanization. Well, Ukraine is not part of the Balkans, so that doesn't exactly work. But yeah, when people talk about Balkanization in America, I mean, Ryan did a whole series on the Balkanization of America, and he did it with all his fetishistic specificity, and at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. Most people who talk about gym stuff don't seem to understand opportunity cost, as if most people developing lucrative tech are scrawny for a reason. There's elements within the creative process which are beyond mere timetable lifestyle scheduling, bean counting. Yeah, I mean, look, the gym stuff, people should try it. It's not for everybody. If it helps you, then it's great, and you should go for it. And if it doesn't help you, then try something else. Did you listen to his music while writing your manifesto? That would make sense. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's happening to girls. No war there, dude. Undeniable evil should be obsessed over until it's destroyed. Okay. It's like, yeah, you get people, and they choose something as evil. I mean, some people, they'll say, like, they'll get obsessed with numbers. They'll be like, the number 23 is evil, or triangles are evil, or evolution is evil. And they'll pick these things, and it's like, people are really suffering out there, man. And it's an insult to everybody in this world who's suffering to pick fetishistic issues and call that the most important thing. You got to pick your battles. And if you're picking your battles here, then you got a problem. Psychological circumcision. So if that, let's say it was true. Let's say that circumcision is the cause behind all psychological problems that all people have. I just don't believe that. I think there are other causes because I've seen it. I've seen people with the parents are divorced. I've seen people where the parents are together. And I mean, I've just had life experience, man. You're telling, well, there's a secret study that they burned the study. They took the physical papers and they burned it as if they didn't store it digitally somewhere. Oh, they burned it because it was too dangerous. They couldn't let the knowledge get out that circumcision is the cause behind all bad things. No, I've met people who are circumcised who are fine. And the determining factors are you religious? Do you come from a good family? Are your parents divorced? Those are important things. Whether you're circumcised or not, I've never been like, you can observe patterns. If you talk to people, if you actually go outside and socialize, I know that's hard these days, but if you talk to people, you start to get a feel for things that ruin people's lives and things that help people be healthy. And circumcision is not a determining factor. I know that because I've met people and I've talked to people. And I haven't conducted studies myself, but, I just see that there are more important things that we could deal with. You're picking a niche issue that nobody cares about. It's like, you sound crazy. Even if you're correct, you sound crazy. It's not actionable. If, let's say I was circumcised, I'm not, but let's say I was, it's not actionable. I can't do anything in the here and now. I can go to the gym. I could go to church. I could do a number of things. I could work on music. I could work on art. I could talk to people. I could reformulate my thinking. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I'm not going to give you, right? I mean, there's so many things. It's on an individual basis. I don't believe that people want a Jordan Peterson book that they can read, and it's like, here's the instructions. No, you actually have to put in the effort and the work to say, what do I need to do? I can't give you it. I'm not going to give you that. And you're giving a simple answer of, we just have to ban circumcision. Man, some people are circumcised. That's not going to help. People need help here and now. That's what's important. I don't want to hear about, if we just talk about circumcision, maybe in 100 years, bro, we've got a class structure that wants to destroy the middle class. You think they're going to be amenable to banning circumcision? No, we have to change our class structure first. Why don't you talk about the class structure? You're talking about the leaves on the tree. I'm talking about the roots. Do you understand how silly this is? Honestly, learning your true views has made me hate you. Good. Good. Honestly, learning that you're an ignorant person, I feel more vindicated. I feel my views are hardening right now. My heart is hardening against you. We're going to war here over the issue of circumcision. America is literally fighting soft war over the surface of the entire globe. Foreskins are vital for the international cosmetics market, so it's net beneficial for happiness and a good thing. All right. I don't think circumcision is the biggest issue right now, but it's emblematic of a great evil. What other human rights violations in the West besides infant genital can be described as systematic and institutional? I don't know, public school? There's a difference between cutting off someone's skin and cutting off someone's skin. It's not the biggest thing. It does cause lingering trauma. Maybe if I had it, maybe I would feel the same way. But it's like if you said it in a way that was conciliatory, if you said something that was not fetishistic, if you said, hey, you know what? We have a lot of problems. And one of them is we're causing trauma to babies by mutilating them. And that's bad. And we have to change a lot of things. And here's one piece of the puzzle. And you know what? We have to keep fighting, and you know what? We shouldn't. So I'm not going to circumcise my kids. And you say, okay, well, let's educate people like that. But when you go around and you make it this shibboleth, and you say, if you don't write a 34,000 word essay on it, and it's not your only thing, and you said it's the only positive thing in my life, that's sick. You're a sick person. When you take things like that, you take things. What if I went around saying sunsets are good? And I said, you should watch the sunset. And then I said, the only thing that matters in my life is sunsets. And if you don't watch sunsets, you're an evil person. Do you understand how sick that is? Do you understand how, you don't go outside, you don't talk to people, you're crazy, you sound crazy, and It's not helping people. You're not helping people who have problems in the here and now, who are circumcised or uncircumcised. Like, that knowledge literally does nothing for people here and now. Not even alimony is keeping you from getting married. That's not true, because when you have divorce laws as they are and everything like that, get a prenuptial agreement. Well, they've been thrown out in court. Incorporate assets. Yeah, you don't know the law. You don't know what you're talking about, because you got one issue. You got your circumcision, and that's all you know. That's all you know. You're turning people off to it. If you came in a conciliatory way, if you said, hey, I hear what you're saying. You know what? It's very important that we address music, culture, art, religion, community. We have to address all these things. We have to address our class structure. We have to talk about the merchant class that creates perverse incentives, that's destroying our middle class. You know, that's all important. And also, by the way, circumcision, it's bad. We shouldn't do it. Here's the reason why. Okay, great. If you come in, there's a basket of maladies that are being forced on us because they're trying to destroy us. So we have to recognize that. We have to try to fight back in a limited way that we can, whatever is in our power. We have to use our passion and love to move toward a more healthy life. And if anti-circumcision is part of that, great. So let's embrace. Let's come at it with you could come at it, but you're an antisocial person, and you're not using this issue to try to help people. You're using this issue to feel superior. That, oh, I know about circumcision, and I only talk about circumcision. If you don't talk about circumcision, you're evil. And so people are coming out, and they're making so much better arguments. There are people coming out, and they're saying things like, it affects more than the genitals. And you know what? You could be right. And I'm not looking at that, and I'm not dogmatically saying it's impossible. It's certainly possible that it traumatizes babies. That's certainly possible. And I would err on the side of caution. I would say, well, look, if I do it and there's a chance it's going to traumatize my baby, or I don't do it and it's not, then, you probably just don't do it. Right? So that's my position. But then you come out and it's a religion to you, and you say nothing else matters, and it's the key issue. That would be like me saying the key issue is we don't believe the moon landing happened. No, that's not the key issue. Actually, people are suffering on it. You have no empathy. You have no ability to empathize with people. You have no ability to feel for people who are suffering. And so you're going out there and you're mimicking empathy. You're mimicking, oh, I'm the moral superior and I care about the trauma of babies. I can't fix it. My live stream is not going to fix your comments on my live stream are not going to fix the trauma of babies. You can introduce it as sort of, a side dish. Like, we have our juicy steak, and then we have the broccoli. And you could have some circumcision broccolis in there. But when you make it the shibboleth, and you say it's the only thing you care about, that is so single-minded. It is so... And it has nothing to do with the day-by-day experience of people. People don't wake up in the morning and say, how can I regrow my foreskin? That is so ridiculous. It's so crazy. You're such an ideological person. It hurts. It hurts me. Thoughts on Charles Carroll, some of the stuff he says in his rants reminds of what have to say. I like Charles Carroll. Prenups mean nothing. Anyway, what such provisions represent is spiritual posture of fear of the female disposition, which is antithesis of marriage as a patriarchal institution. What do you mean by dual monarchy in the U.S. context? I know how the dual monarchy operated in Austria-Hungary. Are you suggesting something akin to regional devolution instead of collapse? I think that's possible. You look at the city-states in America. You look at California. You look at the influence of China. So I think we could get a kind of a dual monarchy situation. Now, it's not going to be exact. It might be a triple monarchy, right? It might not be a dual monarchy. But it's going to be in a democratic mercantile context. It could be the EU, the United Nations. It could be a lot of things could happen. I just don't think it's going to be a collapse. So I give that as one example of how you had the Austrian Empire, then became Austria-Hungary dual monarchy. So it was a shift in the political nature of the state, but it wasn't collapse due to multiculturalism. Oh, dude, you can get married. You don't live in sufficient fear of your would-be wife. Oh, we gotta scroll up. We gotta scroll up here. Charles Carroll. The human foreskin contains most of the nerve endings and accounts for the physical lubrication. Bro, who cares? Why don't you be celibate? Like, this is so, it's so, and it's weird. It's just weird. Enjoying intercourse is immoral, so circumcision is positive. A deliberate effort to damage sexuality should be viewed as extremely evil. All right. You're wrong. 25% of complications behind the... That's a huge number. And you know, it's something like 60% of men in America. That's a huge number. What does that mean, complications? Psychological complications? Hasn't been proved. People in the pro-circumcision movement are documented as BDSM fetishists. And then you list a bunch of names. Then incorporate your assets so no one can touch them. Okay, you're getting ridiculous here. People have problems. Your circumcision thing is not actionable. It's not this is the problem. People talk about these things. They're like, we need to solve black on white crime. It's like, that's not actionable. It happens. You avoid it if you can. That's not actionable. You know, things that are actionable are, we can make choices, we can make decisions in our personal lives to try to become better people. You're getting weird here. You're getting very weird with me. Bro, you are the one obsessed. Bro, what am I obsessed about? Please explain to me. I wrote a 34,000 word manifesto on circumcision, but you're obsessed because you're responding to my comments. Okay, good one. Rice or potatoes? I'm going to have to go with a nice baked potato, maybe with some sour cream on my potato, maybe with some bacon bit sprinkles, maybe with a little bit of stringy cheese, you know, put on there, maybe some, oh, we could put some garlic. Ooh, garlic with my baked potato. Oh, we got to butter that baked potato now. Rice, boring rice, plain rice. I mean, I like rice. It's in sushi. It's fine. It's not evil. It's just bland, you know? But potatoes, now that's something. You can survive. You can have a civilization based off potatoes. We should replace all cornfields with potato fields. I don't know if that's environmentally possible with the climate and everything, but I'm pro-potato. Circumcision equals provides useful material for scientific medical research that can benefit the world, decreases immoral, pleasurable sensations produced by sexual behaviors, don't see the downside. Yeah, sounds like, I don't know, the whole obsession with lubrication, it sounds a little bit degenerate, don't you think? I would read the article, but I'm not joining a foreskin cult. All these people are retracting the messages. They're afraid. They're in fear. The complication of circumcision is way more than less than 1%. Official estimates are 5%. Real numbers are probably higher, given that the U.S. medical field hasn't incentivized to underreport the harm. All he is saying is it should be stopped. The obsession is the ones doing it. Well, I'm not doing it, so I don't see how I have a obsession. Give it a rest, Gregory. You're not going to change his mind. Gregory's plan is actionable. Yours is an incoherent joke. You're a sociopath, bro. Are you saying my plan is a joke? I don't have a plan. I don't think it... Jack, I'm not really talking to you, bro. I'm mostly talking to Gregory and Farzan. We're having a battle here. We're in the ring. We're accusing each other of sociopathy and lack of actionability. I'm talking about making choices that impact your personal life. Circumcision is not an actionable thing. That's what I'm talking about. I'm done with an intactivism, haven't interacted in 4 to 5 months. Nihilism took another mind, rip. The CIA studies still exist. I'm not saying it's cloistered hidden knowledge. Do you feel the same? You're just a bad salesman for this thing. You know, when you want to sell an ideology, you come in with some love. Come in with, hey, I love your message, man. I agree with everything you say. Also, let's ban circumcision. I'd be like, all right. Instead, you come in and you're like, you're obsessed with circumcision. I'm like, bro, what is going on here? Do you feel the same way about people who campaign FGM, crazy fetishists, because no one else does? Are you talking about female circumcision? No one is, if someone came into my live chat and they said, female circumcision is the most important human rights violation, we have to focus on it to the exclusion of anything else. I don't care about anything positive in this world. I'm a nihilist, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, but I want to ban female mutilation. I would say, you're crazy, you're weird, you're sick. Now you guys are doing it with the male circumcision. But yeah, actually the female people don't do that because they're not whatever. I think you have some kind of I think you have some kind of crazy problem. I think it's a sexual problem. I think your sex life is out of order. I think you need to take a break from pornography and your thoughts of lubrication and all of these things. I think you need to take a break. Why don't you go take a little retreat, take a break, turn off, maybe you need to get off the internet a little bit. Maybe you've got a problem, you know? Maybe your obsession here has less to do with helping people in an actionable way and more to do with like weird sexual things. It would be quite funny, someone just randomly finding this stream right now. The US has lots of problems, circumcision is one of them. I focus on it only because virtually no one else is, because I have some concrete plans and expectations of results. Okay, that's a much more reasonable position. And then you can come in and you can say, hey man, you know, I think we're compatible here, rather than saying, I have nothing positive in my life. The only thing keeping me living is my anti-circumcision activism. You know, do you see the difference between the two approaches? I wish I didn't have to say circumcision, but there's, what do I say, mutilation? Unlike anything you talk about, Gregory's issue is actionable. No, not true. You can go to the gym tomorrow. You can order a piano and you can learn some music. You can get out. You can start drawing some faces. You can do a lot of things. There's a lot of things that you can do. Banning circumcision is not an option that you have. The Malchuk question. We got to scroll up. I removed myself. It tired me out. Yeah, it's definitely tiring me out. I'm not a one-trick pony. I talk about a bunch of issues. Your perception of me as obsessed is only because I'm the only person in this corner on the internet. No, you always come in the live chat of everyone's videos and you're always talking about it. That's an obsession. And your profile pic is a man on a bullhorn. I'd love to see the video of you out there on the street screaming about this stuff. That would be entertaining. Argue with people on the street. All of Europe is not circumcised. They're still cucks. Hey, Tradsky, coming in with a very good argument there. They're not circumcising in Europe. I'm involved in efforts in European countries that are actually in the middle of passing. I am involved in efforts. Yeah, by posting comments on YouTube channels. Great, bro. What are you going to tell? Asia for the Asians, Africa for the Africans. I mean, this is the level of I'm changing politics. I'm posting on the internet. I'm changing politics. I'm involved with politics. Okay, bro. That sounds like you're a little bit delusional. Potato Patrician BTFOing rice rubes. Very true. Do you see any way we could reverse the war in the middle class? Yes, we would have to change our class orientation. I think that's done through technology. That's not actionable. So in the meantime, we have to survive the war. And in order to survive the war, we need to get ourselves healthy. I'm all about the health. You can change your health. Little decisions every day. You can improve your health. That's what I'm about. I'm a health advocate. I'm a health activist. You can't change your foreskin, but you can change your health. So let's all change our health spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. Let's learn about our health. Let's get physical. Let's get healthy. That's what I'm advocating for. That's my plan. Let's get healthy. And there's a huge spectrum. There's from the individual level to the societal level. So it's actionable at every level. It's very basic. It's very straightforward. So we have to survive, but otherwise you got to take out the merchant class, you got to kick them down a notch, and you have to elevate the warrior class and the priest class. I think that's done through technology. It's a little bit deus ex machina, but I think that's the way technology works, is it changes class orientation. And for most history, it's been toward the merchant class, but I think we're going to reach a breaking point because of genetic technologies. I think that's what's going to change it, because it has to do with our nature. And if we're able to change our nature, then we can actually revolutionize the class orientation. But again, that's not actionable. That's just a civilizational projection. Will the left remain fixated on demonizing whites while the right remains plagued by libertarians? Yes, because the left is the billionaire left, and they're controlled by billionaires. And so they're going to promote a religion of racial resentment. And the right is also controlled by billionaires, so they're going to continue to support the merchant class in the form of libertarianism. I think it's a test run of cashless society nonsense. I have some, though, probably. It will go up a bit. Yeah, talking about Bitcoin. Hello, Arvol. Arvol in the chat. We've interacted amicably before. I have no idea why this hostility cropped up now. I haven't got notifications for this channel for months, as other people have reported too. Every time you've been in my live chat, you've talked about it. Every time you're in anybody's live chat, you talk about it. You know, we all know that this is the only thing you talk about. And you came in and you said, it's the only positivity. I don't want people saying, I don't want to say the only positivity I have in my life is this issue, when you're talking about lubrication, and you need to step back. You need to see it from other people's perspective. There's a way that you can put it forward that's conciliatory, and there's a way you can come at it which is negative and hot. I'm a nihilist, I'm an atheist, and all I care is about mutilation. It's just it's gross. People don't want to hear it. But people will, oh boy, we gotta zoom, we gotta scroll. Bitcoin will become a corporate asset and skyrocket. You think Iraq-style invasions are still possible? Will they invade Iran? It's possible. As far as likely, I mean, Iran has a below replacement fertility rate. I just don't see a good future for Iran. I think Iran is going to have a Soviet-style collapse. I don't think you're going to see an invasion of Iran. Iran is basically a European country, so... I mean, but it's always possible. Look, we haven't had World War II in 70 years. It's possible. But I think we're shifting away from conventional warfare more toward information warfare. I think you're still going to have proxy wars in Yemen and Ukraine and whatever. But involving the United States, it's becoming less likely. Not impossible, but less likely. They will invade Iran with high-tech artillery, drones, and commando squads. Possible. I would never eliminate the possibility, but I think it becomes less likely as time goes on because Iran's just getting weaker and weaker. And eventually it's not going to be a threat to anybody if it keeps going in its current direction. I mean, if Iran can't even have babies and, then what are they going to do? If you can't solve that, if you can't do that much, then, what's really going on there? They're split on Iran. Half want the war, half are content to let creeping liberalism do its work. Are you joining Arvol's commune? Well, we're all about health. So, I'm in contact. I support it. I want to support it. As far as joining it, it's got to be set up. We've got to get people in there. We got to get it going. We got to work on it. So we'll see what happens. I am supporting it behind the scenes, and we're closely watching the developments as they happen. It's a long process. People need to be psychologically primed in terms of the arguments. People need to understand the arguments. I mean, I hear these arguments like, I can't join a commune because then I wouldn't be able to do other stuff, as if there's an opportunity cost. And even the way you phrase it, joining the commune, you don't have to join a commune. It's simply about... We need to understand there's an advantage in having physical proximity. That's the only argument. There's an advantage to buying land. There's an advantage to having physical proximity to people with whom you have understanding. That's the basic thing. And it doesn't have to. I mean, look, I endorse people having religious agreement. I endorse people. Look, I like living around people. I like having good neighbors. So I think there's a spectrum where you say it's good to buy land, it's good to be in physical proximity with people. They're down the road, they're in the other town over, you're in the same state, whatever. It's good to have physical proximity. You have to start somewhere. The reasons for Arkansas is the zoning laws, the political situation. So there's arguments to be made concerning rural land as an asset, as an investment. So all those arguments are there. I think people have to be, you can disagree, you can say, well, I don't think it should be in Arkansas. I think this. Well, then you need to be working towards something like that where you think it should. If you don't think Arkansas, if you think it's Oregon, then do it in Oregon. But people need to be moving toward that. People need to be moving toward investing, and I think rural land's a good investment, and I think people need to be working toward physical proximity with people with whom they have a mutual understanding. That can mean different things. But just staying put where you are, not investing, and not being in physical proximity with other people, that's a problem. That's a problem. So we need to work towards solutions. As far as I know, Arvil is the only person I know who's really interested. As far as people who are interested in one issue, he's not one of them, but he has been interested in that issue for a while. And I don't see many people doing it. I've seen a lot of people I mean, look, communes, utopias, there's an American history of that. And different people have approached it in different ways. And I don't like the way that most people approach it. Look, there have been Hindu communes, there have been hippie communes, there have been, we saw Waco and we saw Ruby Ridge, and we've seen different kinds of things go on. And there's a lot of flaws. There's Mr. Craig, he was doing his sort of thing. There's a lot of problems with a lot of different things, and I think that, with Arvil, you're headed in a good direction, and it's an evolving thing, and it could go in different directions. It's not like, all the implications when people say you're joining the commune. So what? Then we're gonna meet in the mess hall, and we're all eating rice and beans, and so that different people have different imaginations of that, but there's a very basic message. You buy rural land, you have physical proximity, those are advantages, those are important things. So, you have those things, and now you've got a starting point, and then you can branch off from there, and there's a lot of things you can do from there. So that there's some fundamental ideas I think are key, and you build off them, but people need to be on board with that general idea. You may disagree with the implementation. People are going to be like, well, it needs to be Protestant, it needs to be Catholic, it needs to be this, that. And those things are not really my fundamentals, but other people have those fundamentals, and people will branch off in whatever direction. But, I support people who are trying to make personal changes. So far as in is oh, go to the gym, that's silly. How many times do I have to say it? There's no one solution. So it's not just going to the gym. It's not just, oh, well, we bought rural land, end of the day, everything's solved. Oh, we're in physical proximity, everything's solved. No, it's all of these things, because we're being attacked from every level, so we need to resist on every level. So the idea that you're going to pinpoint one thing I say, like going to the gym, and then you're going to say, oh, well, that's your whole solution. No, it's not. It's being healthy, and there's a number of ways to be healthy. And I'm throwing things out as examples, and you say, oh, well, I already do that. Okay, well, great. Then keep doing what you're doing. And don't be antisocial, and don't come into my live chat and tell me that, you're going to support this Malchuk vision of the only issue is circumcision, and that's the only positive thing. That's where I started to have a problem. If he came in, he started to make conciliatory statements. If he started with that, I would have said, fine, whatever. If he keeps making those incessant comments, I'm going to get annoyed. But if he comes in positive, great, we're positive. When he says, he gives this it's nihilistic, and we got to fight nihilism. Nihilism is a bigger threat than circumcision. Liberalism is creeping in Iran. They seem more fanatic than ever. I don't think so. I don't think they are more fanatic than ever. The bullhorn as a repurposed foreskin. Powerful symbolism. Are Redditors circumcised? That's all that matters. If they're circumcised, that's really bad. People think lubrication is funny. Yeah, it is actually kind of funny. It's American media that's turned hand lotion into a euphemism. Most intact people don't even comprehend it on the first pass. Now we're getting dirty with it. Now we're getting deep in the... I'm like, lubrication is weird. Let's not talk about that. And you're like, let me get in depth. Let me talk to you about... Let me really get in depth on the subject of lubrication. There's just a total lack of self-awareness. That's what I'm trying to point out. Reddit's attitude towards mutilation is very close. What's the future of the middle class employment? Bad. Bad. Bureaucracy, DMV, employed by the government. Less unionization, more of this, Uber Eats style. Iran is too powerful to be attacked. They would bring down the rest of the Middle East. Israel is too divided internally to support it directly. Iran is not Iraq. Well, that's true. You can't predict the future. Black swans will always occur. America is finished. When? In 10 years? Not likely. In 20 years? No way. In 40 years? Not happening. Maybe in 200 years. Maybe then we'll start to be finished. I'm glad someone's admitting circumcision's original motives. There are enough rational actors within Israel and Iran to prevent a direct war. AIPAC's influence is bound to wane once the AOC wing defeats the Clintonite wing. I mean, I think it's a slow process, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a direct war, especially with Biden. Biden is not like an Iran hawk. I don't know what people think about Biden, but he's not. His history isn't like going to war with Iran. So I don't think we're going to see that. Sometimes people are like, well, maybe Trump will try to go to war with Iran to stay in power. That's kind of scary. I don't like that idea, but we will see new forms of apartheid arise surrounding technology, life extension tech for the elite, Snapchat filters, TikTok for everyone else. Yeah, that's very likely. Life extension technology exists and isn't expensive, similar to CRISPR. Biden's cabinet is a who's who of anti-Iranians. Prepare Iran. I guess. I mean, maybe you could say the same thing about Barack Obama, but he still did the Iran deal, so I don't know. I don't know about all that. I mean, maybe Biden has just like totally shifted on the issue, or maybe he doesn't matter. Maybe we should be focused more on Kamala. I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's not a given that life extension tech will be only limited to the elite. CRISPR is getting exponentially cheaper. I predict we'll see a lot of black market hacking. They do a cost-benefit analysis. Are you telling me Jared Kushner isn't Zionist? No, I'm not telling you he isn't a Zionist. Actually, I'm not sure who you're talking to here. There's a lot of conversations going on. Iran is too strong. The neocons can saber rattle. Iran is strong. America could flatten Iran. Well, there are costs to warfare. I mean, America could flatten North Korea, but we're not going to do that. There's cost to everything. Like Greg says, there's a cost-benefit analysis. It's kept artificially expensive. If you want HGH injections, you're going to pay $5,000 per month. CRISPR is the wild card. Iran is strong at exploding their own civilian airliners. Well, I don't know if they actually did that, but getting their top scientists assassinated by the U.S. and Israel. Yeah, I mean, Iran is like, it's kind of a stalemate over there. Iran is too strong to be directly attacked. 4 times bigger than Iraq. They would incinerate Israel. They probably have nukes. Any chance of getting access to the Discord? I lost access after you made video interview a requirement. Well, if you want to do a video interview, throw up an introductory video of yourself on your channel, and I'll check it out and consider your application. Anti-mutilation people are crazy. Proceeds to launch into lecture justifying moving to Plato cult compound in Arkansas with strangers. Well, that's the thing. Moving into a similar vicinity with other people is not a Plato cult compound. But okay. Also, you're talking to a stranger right now. Why are you talking to strangers? That's weird. Everybody's a stranger before you get to know, so you can get to know people. I'm not saying sign a blood pact with people you don't know. I'm saying get to know people and move around them. So I know Arvol, and I think people should get to know him, and I think he's encouraging something that everybody can do. If you're not in Arkansas, then you can encourage people to live near you. I think people should be in proximity. This internet thing where we just don't care about proximity anymore is not healthy. We should have people in proximity. Now, as far as the cult there is no compound. So there's no compound to have. I mean, look, as far as cults go, I think every religion is called a cult by every other religion. So I think people should be religious. And you can be an atheist and you can call every religion a cult. Do you think there is even a slight possibility there will be a schism in the Republican and Democrat parties? If not, how will the billionaire class deal with the emergence of radicals? I don't think AOC is that radical. That's, I guess, the answer. I think the two-party system is here to stay. Do you guys not remember the Iran-Iraq War? America stepped in at the very end and completely turned the conflict in Iraq's favor. Oh, we gotta scroll up. Scrolling. Oh, where are we at? CRISPR has the potential to be the great leveler. I'm keeping close tabs. Very good. Not when CRISPR allows anybody to make bacteria, yeast crank out HGH. Not that HGH is a good life extension strategy. It's correlated with cancer and heart disease. I'll try to convince my wife to join. The Lulberts did that in New Hampshire, Free State Project, Guns and Weed. Yeah. Well, I'm not all about the weed. Again, the idea that these are all equal, like, oh, they tried the Free State Project, and that's not good. Therefore, anybody moving in proximity is always a bad idea. That doesn't really follow. There are a lot of cringe, we use these cult, commune, compound. These are all cringe terms because we've seen a lot of people do it in, around libertarianism, around weed, around weird things. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think we're getting a situation. People need to be in proximity. People need to make investments. Rural land is a good investment. Even if you don't live there, it's a good investment. I think people with kids, as far as raising them, it would be nice if you could raise them in an environment where people, have a mutual understanding. I just think, I don't know, I think you'd start, a lot of weird incels on the internet aren't going to get it. But if you have a wife and kids, you start to understand the appeal of living around people who are decent people. And you start to see that, like, living in an apartment in the city is not the best idea. And having proximity with people that you have a mutual understanding with is a good idea. So, if you're like radical, alienated from society with no hope, and that's your perspective, then yeah, I guess it doesn't make sense to live around like-minded people because you've got nothing going for you. But if you have children and you're trying to protect them and promote their best interests, and you're looking at public school and you're looking at what's going on, then it's like, hey, maybe, having some friendly faces, down the road would not be the worst thing ever. I feel like a decentralized network would be better than a centralized commune. Well, as far as centralization versus decentralization, there are advantages to both. And what you're describing right now is technically this live chat is a decentralized network. As far as a centralized commune, there's levels of centralization. You can centralize in I guess the most authoritarian way is you have, there are Mormon communes, there are Orthodox Jewish communes in Curious Joel. So there are already functional communes, and some of them are centralized and some of them are less centralized. You get to choose your involvement. I'm not asking people to go in and cut a slit on their hand and mix their blood with somebody else and move into a longhouse with a bunch of other dudes and live in military barracks. That's not what I'm asking people to do. People can say, well, hey, if you like Arvol's content and you like his message, get to know him, look at rural land as an investment, and hey, if you can live on your investment as well as holding it as an asset, that's killing two birds with one stone. So it's not some kind of extreme crazy thing. It can be, if you want to make an extreme crazy thing, you're free to do that. You can go to Curious Joel, you can join a Mormon compound. They've got Mormon compounds in Mexico. You can go join that. I'm not saying you don't have the option to go crazy if you want to go crazy. And it's not always bad sometimes you can be crazy cool. But as far as the idea of centralization versus decentralization, we're already quite decentralized. I think I've had enough decentralization. I think having some centralization, just in terms of having people in proximity, it's good to have people where you can go and be like, hey, neighbor, want to come over for dinner? I mean, if you can already do that, great. I'm happy for you that you have a good community that you live in. But if you don't, I think those people, you're either going to remain isolated and basically degenerate into a weak, unstable, unproductive person, or you're going to get involved with the community. I believe morality is founded on community. I believe they're inseparable. So I think you have to be part of a community. If you're already part of one, great, excellent, Mr. Farzan. You're part of a community. You're working out at the gym. Sounds like everything's going great. Sounds like, I don't know why you're on my live stream, but sounds like everything's going great for you. But to the other people who don't have that, there's somebody out there, Arvel, who's trying to address these problems, and maybe you disagree with them, and maybe if you have disagreements, maybe you give a counter proposal. If you don't think Arkansas is the right state, start it in your state. But I don't know. I see a lot of criticism, and it doesn't seem constructive. But again, my plan is health. I want to be healthy. I want everybody to be healthy. I think you can do that no matter where you are. Obviously, I think community is part of health. So I think it all ties together. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can become more healthy without moving to Arkansas. But I also think that for some people, it would be a great help to be involved with people in their life who have mutual goals and mutual understanding. If anything, I think an Israeli-Iranian rapprochement is more likely than an Israeli-agitated war possible. I mean, you look at Saudi Arabia, they're very cozy, so they need to invade before they get a nuke. Iran may have secret nukes. Most Iranians don't care about Israel. The Amish excel at doing communes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not part of the Amish, but I have no problem with the Amish. I mean, people say things like, oh, the Amish are so bad. It's like the Amish, they're fine. They're doing their thing. So everybody, I don't have a problem with the Amish. If people want to join the Amish, that's great. I don't want to join the Amish because they're Amish. I'm not Amish. They've got their Amish way, their Amish beliefs, and they're not compatible with who I am. So, I'm not going to join the Amish. But I think that we need to understand what makes the Amish successful and healthy, because I think they are successful and healthy, and we need to take from them what we can, and what we can't accept, then we're going to continue to have technology and things like that. But, the Amish are good. You've got the Canadian has come back to the live stream. Now, I was thinking, what do you do? What do you do about death threats in a live stream? It's been since March. It's been, how many months is that? 9 months. What do you do? And some people said ignore it, and some people said ban it. And I don't know if I unbanned him or if what did I do? Let's say, what do we do? There we go. The problem is the Amish lack any sort of power, unlike the Mormons, who are represented in the highest levels of government finance, CIA. Yep, that's a legitimate point. And what's the next? Ken is right about AOC. She's more obsessed with hating Whitey than abolishing billionaires, as she claims. Yeah. If you wanted to abolish the billionaire class, you would not be in favor of mass immigration. So I think AOC's fake. Amish average 6 kids. They're exploding. It's very true. The Amish are exploding. I wish good things for the Amish. I just, I'm not Amish. If I was Amish, I would be Amish. It sounds, I don't know, it sounds sort of self-explanatory or whatever, but I encourage, if you feel that you can go be Amish, go be Amish. I don't have a problem with people being Amish. You can say, oh, that's crazy. Oh, you're going to live in a compound with Amish people? You're going to live with Amish people in whatever state. Could be Arkansas. I'm sure there are Amish in Arkansas. There's Amish all over the place. You're going to live with Amish in Pennsylvania? That's crazy. They don't use technology. Hey, man, I don't have a problem with it. I don't see why you have to be negative. I think the Amish are quite healthy. I don't know. I don't think they circumcise their kids, but I don't think they talk about it all the time. So, you know, I don't have a problem with the Amish. It was a long stream, incredibly long. We're going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're at 49 likes. If you put the link out there and we get to 21 more likes and we get to 70 likes, then you will see another live stream, and then we'll get back into that. But thanks for participating. Thank you for starting a war over the issue of circumcision. And we're going to smash that like button, and we'll